I think it's about time to start. Um, and this webinar, UnPoison Our City, is actually one of the first very public specific webinars. So a lot of our previous webinars have been quite specialist or quite niche aspects. It's been about spray drift in the farmlands. It's been about water. It's been about the regulations and farming towns, etc. But this is one where we have the largest proportion of people living in cities, and there's a big misconception that pesticides are used only out in agriculture. Cities have a tremendous toxic load from chemicals and pesticides, and this webinar is to create a lot more awareness with the public, and also to bring in discussions that can be relevant at a higher level for those that can influence what happens at municipality level, what happens at provincial level, what happens at national level. And very luckily, we've got a good representation of people in the room that can actually take these conversations back to places where decisions actually get made. And that's also said, understanding that change doesn't happen overnight, but the wheels are already in motion, and we're up against planetary tipping points, and we need to get going. So I've changed the program a little bit. It was going to be Natalija from PAN speaking first, and I'm actually going to present first because I think it's best for me to give the context of what's happening locally, and then we can look at examples in the global north of who's doing it better than we are. So I will talk first, and I will cover the local action, and UnPoison has been involved in some of it, around weed control and the blanket spraying of pesticides in our suburbs on verges and other public spaces. There will be some participants from some of those movements and areas that will join us. We'll then listen to Natalija from PAN, who is the head of Pesticide-Free Cities and Towns EU for the Pesticide Action Network. We will then hear from Muir, who's a Biodiversity Control Officer for the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, if I got the order right. Then the esteemed Professor Leslie Petrik from the University of the Western Cape, who has done a lot of studies on water and the impacts on our marine nature. Give me the better word for that. Our marine environments, and also she'll be looking at studies that have also been done on our rivers. I'm very grateful to Elroy Plaatjies, who is an environmental health practitioner in the city of Cape Town, that will be talking to us specifically about pesticide use in the township, and that has come into critical focus, especially with the tuberphos, the recent deaths of the children in Naledi linked to the pesticide, the agricultural pesticide tuberphos. So and then we will have a very important discussion on rat control. There's not an answer that I know of at the moment that's a very clear answer, and that's why it is a discussion. And I think it's a really important discussion to have, because these issues are all linked, and there are many different levers and mechanisms and stakeholders at play. And there's a lovely quote by John Muir that says, when we tug at one thing in nature, we can see that everything is connected. And so it's really time to stop looking at these things in isolation. We need all the related departments, all the related stakeholders to be talking about these things, and we need to actually redesign the system and look at how we do things differently. the previous paradigm has had its time and it did its job for while it worked. Right, that was my long intro. I am going to share my screen. Okay, so I've already given an intro to UnPoison Our City, the webinar, and there's a lot to cover. And what I would also just love to share is that information changes and gets updated quite rapidly. So facts and figures might be slightly off, but as a whole, there's not a material change in the information and the science presented. So before we get into that work, I'd just like to share a little bit about UnPoison. UnPoison is a core advocacy NPO. We focus on the regulatory framework around pesticides because that's what our capacity is for. At a later stage, we will look at moving into other contaminants and pollutants. We also I convene a high-level strategic expert network, and I will go more into that. The intention is to initiate campaigns through the work, the research, and the advocacy work that we do, and help to accelerate and activate a movement that will ideally transition South Africa into a safe, healthy, clean and just environment for all of us. And this is working with multiple stakeholders across sectors. So that's a little bit more about what I've just said, all the things that we are engaged with. This is an example of the kind of advocacy work that we do. We comment on the regulatory framework of pesticides across departments, which is very fragmented, outdated, and hasn't been well monitored or enforced. But things are changing. How we get the knowledge out there then is exactly like this. It's with webinars that bring stakeholders from different levels together, as many different impacted or invested stakeholders from across spectrums as we can. And then we try and get the knowledge out there through the press and the media and the groups that we convene. So just a little bit so that you can see what the UnPoison network is made up of. As you can see, there's the engine room, there's a brains trust of UnPoison, which is a high-level strategic expert network that covers most sectors. We have lawyers, doctors, farmers, farm worker organizations, agronomists, researchers, NGOs, toxicologists, people that are and have been in the chemical industry. We've got retail, and the list goes on. And from there, we can identify the issues and challenges. We can respond very quickly and get input from a very well-rounded perspective. And that helps with the work that we do, especially because we're an unfunded, largely volunteer network. And this has really helped us to be able to do the work. From there, there's feedback in and out of other WhatsApp groups that are linked to UnPoison. As you can see, many of you would have come from the Poison Free Peninsula public group, and we'll discuss that campaign. So what are pesticides actually? Pesticides is a blanket term for pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, nematicides, etc. So South Africa's pesticides in numbers, these numbers, the amount of registered pesticides might have changed because they're continually pesticides being discontinued or registered. So these figures are largely accurate, give and take a few on either side. It's important to understand that when we look at highly hazardous pesticides legal in South Africa, that number 195, we're talking about the active ingredients. And active ingredients can go on to make hundreds and thousands of other formulations and brand names. Our last webinar was a webinar on highly hazardous pesticides. And this is a very important group of pesticides for the public to become educated on, because we are exposed to them in our daily lives, and they are acutely and chronically toxic. And this is the group of pesticides that UnPoison and many other organizations and networks are actively working to phase out. And so, yeah, that's for another webinar that's already happened, but it's important that the public starts becoming aware of these things, because it affects our public and environmental health, the world that we live in. So here we have other uses of pesticides, and we're going to cover some of these. I'm going to cover those that are out in public grounds, the roadsides, school parks, etc. Debbie Muir is going to cover what happens in our home, and Elroy is going to take a look at the townships. And hopefully we will cover most of these different areas of use in this webinar. So coming on now to the topic of UnPoison Our City, which is this webinar. Cape Town is a national park city. The city's wildlife includes over 360 bird species, 83 mammalian species, 27 amphibian species, and in excess of 2,000 indigenous plant species. We live in a very, very special place, and it's our natural wonders and natural environment and the species that we cohabit with that makes Cape Town the valuable city that it is. Although things might be working better than other parts of the country, and there might be political parties that claim this as part of their work, let's face it, that the fact that Cape Town is so amazing is the natural wonders, the animals, the mountains, the seas, and all of these incredible things that we share and call our home. Cape Town does not belong to us. We are custodians of this beautiful, beautiful biome. So here is a picture of some of the species that we cohabit with. And then I'd like to talk about the introduction to this work and how UnPoison got involved, and looking at some of the other organizations. So NEAG, which is the Noatuk Environmental Action Group, specifically Glenn Ashton, developed what he called the glyphosate report. NEAG did a very, very thorough research document that was submitted to the City of Cape Town that went into all of the environmental and health effects of specifically focusing on glyphosate, although there are many other pesticides that are used. And NEAG started the engagement at a councillor level with the City of Cape Town, and was met with a collaborative councillor, and that accelerated to having a meeting with some of the departments involved. NEAG reached out to UnPoison as well, and we supported in those meetings and in some of the drive for Noatuk to become exempt. And thank you to all of the efforts, and also to the city for finding a way, and for our local ward councillor who was very, very pro helping this initiative. Noatuk gained exemption from the spray schedule for 3 years. At a similar time, in 2023, Jenny Cullinan from Ubiji and Nanette Tarleton started a campaign called Poison Free Peninsula. This was after, on World Bee Day, Jenny was walking with her dog, and contractors were spraying her suburb, and they didn't stop spraying. They actually sprayed over her and her dog walking in the street. And as a result, largely subsequently led by Nanette, Poison Free Peninsula has become a very big public group that shares information about spraying, spray schedules, activates different suburbs, and has really managed to garner a lot of public support. Nanette has worked tirelessly to create petitions, and she mails all of the councillors and she mails all of the departments. And Nanette has been absolutely an integral force in getting the information out into the public and in activating a groundswell of awareness and mobilizing for this amazing work. And there have been remarkable results so far, which I will go into. So weed control happens twice annually. Cape Town has 10,000 kilometers of roads. And roads are a super highway into our water bodies, etc. No notice is given to residents, hardly ever. So the Poison Free Peninsula group often sends a flurry of letters and requests for notice. We do understand that it is often difficult to know these things in advance because the weather can change, but still there is a legal requirement for notice to be given to residents and for the labels of the pesticides to be adhered to. So there's also very often no signage or warnings, although I do believe that this has started to improve with the public pressure. The pesticides sprayed are toxic to humans, toxic to mammals, and toxic to aquatic organisms. So then glyphosate is really the bad boy of all the pesticides, or has the bad rap. But it's important to know that it's not just glyphosate. However, here are some facts about glyphosate. It's still the widest used herbicide in South Africa. And agriculture often argues that, especially for broad acres, which are very, very big farms of thousands of hectares, that they don't know what alternatives can be used. And that is a discussion being had in a different forum. However, weed control on the public verges is not a food security discussion. It's not going to radically impact the economy, even if that was an argument. So it's a completely different discussion, and the reasons for using a herbicide in blanket spraying across suburbs needs to be thoroughly interrogated. So what most people don't understand with pesticides, and this is all over the world, is that when a pesticide, the risk assessments are done for a pesticide, where they test the health and safety and the impacts, and they do all of the risk assessments that are required for a legal registration. It is only the active ingredient in isolation that is tested, and never the formulation, all the other ingredients together. And this is often where risks and dangers come in, where, for example, some co-formulants in Roundup formulations, when I talk about a formulation, I mean a brand name, a product. Cleanup is a brand name, Roundup is a brand name, and there are various brand names that make glyphosate products. It's the other ingredients, and you can see at the bottom of the slide, the co-formulants can make it 2,000 times more toxic. So you can see that Bayer has paid over 16 billion in lawsuits. There are over 100,000 new cases still to be heard. And what Bayer is considering or trying to do, and the pesticide industry is trying to do, is they're trying to get a blanket immunity against further lawsuits. And this is something, they got immunity in Iowa, and this is now being fought in America. And the same as the vaccine companies got blanket immunity against any harm from the COVID vaccine, they're attempting to do this for pesticides, although pesticides are not targeted. A pesticide drift can go, it's been reported 9 kilometers from where a pesticide is sprayed in agriculture. That wouldn't be the same in an urban environment necessarily. So then on the specifications for how the contractors need to apply the pesticides, herbicide mixtures must contain 2 groups of pesticides. So this is just an example. It's a selective or non-selective systemic broadleaf herbicide. Now, again, like I said, active ingredients are only tested in isolation. Pesticides, different products that get used together and combined, have never been tested for their combined effects. And we also live in a toxic soup now. It's not just pesticides that we're exposed to every day. We're exposed to other chemicals and toxins and pollutants that come through the products that we use, cleaning products. They come through air pollution, they come through the water. And there's no scientific data or study on the compounding and synergistic effects of all of these pesticides on us and our health. So this is a slide about the many different health impacts of pesticides. So many different types of cancers, kidney and liver disease, fertility and reproductive abnormalities. Our sperm count and fertility is decreasing, and there's a lot of studies and research coming out to say that we could be poisoning ourselves out of a population by the year I think we're going to be declining because our fertility rates will drop so significantly by 2100. Neurological conditions, Parkinson's disease has been linked, mutating genes, and the list goes on. And I'm sure I would love in the chat, which I can't see, if those that have that kind of information can also just share it in the chat, go into more detail. So this is with regards to herbicides. Who's the most at risk? It's farmers, landscapers, agricultural workers, professional gardeners, groundkeepers, pesticide and herbicide applicators. And that's for the kind of pesticides that I'm talking about for weed control. Now, what Nanette has been, one of the important points that Nanette has been highlighting is why weeds grow in roads. And weeds are opportunistic, so they will only grow where a weed is weakened. And some of them don't actually damage the roads, some of them plug the roads. So if there are not existing infrastructure weaknesses, the weeds cannot cause any harm, and weeds are not the primary cause of road infrastructure damage. It's then also important to acknowledge that there is pesticide resistance of weeds, which is very, very important factor. We will look after this webinar at what Pan EU is a campaign and how effectively they are managing pesticides for road maintenance, etc. So pesticides are not the only solution. And in fact, according to all of us, they are not the solution. So specifically what the Poison-Free Peninsula campaign, NEAG, the movement in Scarborough, etc., one of the most pressing emergencies is the lack of public notice. So no animals or people should be present in the application area during and within 2 hours after the application. Within 2 hours after the application, there are all these kinds of specifications that are required. And most of the time, this is not happening. I believe that there's also meant to be, this needs to be verified, but there should be public notice of the spraying at least 2 weeks in advance. Again, please verify that, but residents should be given notice. And while it might be difficult with weather conditions changing, we need to figure out how to do this so that residents' rights and constitutional rights are not breached in the process. So, like we said, non-negotiable. A possible solution is that we need a notification system between the contractor, the ward councillor, and the communities. This can't be hard. We've got ratepayers associations, we've got many WhatsApp groups for security. Councillors of all the different areas should be able to have a direct and immediate notification method with their suburbs. And there should be communication between the contractor, the ward councillor, and the community about what's happening so that residents can prepare themselves and take the necessary precautions to protect themselves while the current weed control system is in place. So, like I said earlier, roads are a superhighway into our water bodies. We've got 10,000 kilometers of road in Cape Town. We know that Cape Town is a very water scarce region, South Africa water scarce. Cape Town is surrounded by water and it's enmeshed with 14 rivers and 10 wetlands. We're a Ramsar wetland city, and the runoff from the roads gets into these waterways and bioaccumulates in the water and silt and sediment for years. It can get into our groundwater. It can affect all of the species, the aquatic, mammalian, insect species that live in and around and all over this incredible biome. The pesticides can also evaporate off the roads. The roads can get very hot and they can evaporate. And this can form part of the water cycle that then comes back down and is indiscriminate about where it affects. So again, Cape Town has been voted the best city in the world many times over. And why aren't we treating Cape Town like the best city in the world? If it's our incredible ecosystem and our biodiversity, we are the most biodiverse city in the world. We're a national park city. It's really time to change how we do things, because the value of Cape Town is being eroded through outdated practices and policies. And this is an urgent call for all the people involved to get together and actually start making a change fast. We're running out of time. And just to impress upon us with biodiversity, Table Mountain is a UNESCO 7 Wonders of the World. Alderman Andrews was hosted by ICLE's Cities Biodiversity Centre as part of the Global Biodiversity Framework. And there were pledges made. Sustainable development is a challenging concept, and even more so in a city like Cape Town. We are striving to address the pressing need for development while protecting some of the most threatened biodiversity. But this is absolutely an imperative. The Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment has the target 30-30 by the year 2030. 30% of our conservation areas need to be better protected. And there is so much pesticide use in our conservation areas. So what is the solution? At a policy and advocacy level, which is where UnPoison gets involved quite a lot, there have been a lot of talks with those that actually understand how all the budgets and all the departments work together. Roads currently has the mandate for weed control. So it's roads policy that then dictates how the contractors work, and policy change is entirely up to roads. However, we currently have cleansing, we have green jobs, we have EPWP, which is the employment program in the Western Cape. And the roads are, we see the people out there all the time. It's amazing. You know, the litter's being picked up. Cape Town looks clean at a surface level. It's picture card perfect to be the best city in the world. Yet these toxic pesticides are being sprayed at the same time. And you know, it's a toxic double standard. But if we can have the difficult red tape conversation about how we can reallocate budget, can we shuffle and shift departments' mandates? This is the conversation that actually needs to be had more than what civil society can do. Can we reallocate the mandate of weed control to cleansing and to EPWP? Those that have a better understanding, that work in council, please weigh in here. But let's see if we can reshuffle the budget and get those mandates put into the departments where it makes the most sense and it has the greater benefit, where taxpayers don't need to fork out more just to live, just to protect themselves. And there are incredible wins. There's green jobs, there's our incredible biodiversity goals, there's accolades, there's tourism. Everybody loves Cape Town because it's a green, or it looks like a green city. But if you peek below the hood, you know, things are a little bit different, what's really going on. For UnPoison, this would be the most critical aspect, is how we actually shift and change the policy of how things are done and who gets what mandates. Then just a little note on some of the work that UnPoison does at a national level. This is our list of highly hazardous pesticides, as I mentioned earlier, and checking the city's current inventory of weed and pest control against the HHP list, highly hazardous pesticide list, is imperative, especially now with the Department of Agriculture phasing out a big group of highly hazardous pesticides by today. Actually, today is the last day. It's really time to not work in silos anymore, and not having highly hazardous pesticides on the city's spray schedule is a barest minimum. So in the meantime, because changing policy and budget might take time, I would like it not to take too much time, because this conversation now we've been having it since 2022. In the meantime, there are residents and suburbs that are organizing themselves to become spray exempt. And I spoke about Notuk initially, that was led by NIAG, which is incredible. And like it says at the bottom of the slide, this is great and amazing. But ongoing and long term, it's unfeasible and unreasonable for civil society to manage this consistently, especially paying our rates and our rates bills, which should cover all of these things. So I just would like to celebrate some more wins, because I think this is really amazing, and it shows such a progressive work in collaboration with the ward councillors. Really ward councillors that have listened, that have been involved, that have helped to campaign, that care about their wards in this way. We salute you, and we are so grateful to you, and to all of the residents that managed to organize themselves and get exemption. Clovelly, Kirstenhof, Lakeside, Misty Cliffs, Notuk, Scarborough, Tokai, Westlake, Sunsvik. And there are many more suburbs right now organizing themselves. So just a little peek into how, if you belong in a suburb and you would also like exemption, these are the steps to take. You need to create a poll in your local neighborhood and get the majority of residents to confirm that they're opposed to blanket spraying. So there are lots of resources that we can share, Poison Free Peninsula can share, and NIAG can share, just to help with the education. We have also collaboratively got a folder with resources that other suburbs can use, that has polls and templates and those kinds of things. Once you have your statistics on the poll, you need to mail your ward councillor with a request and a guarantee that your neighbourhood will be managed by yourselves or the Ratepayers Association, etc. The ward councillor should then mail Jade Oliver and request that blanket spraying is exempt. So if anybody has anything else to add there, please do so in the chat. There are resources that people can share, and I would encourage you to, I will share email addresses. I will share UnPoison's and Poison Free Peninsulas. If you would like to join as an area champion and help get your area exempt, there's a WhatsApp group for you specifically to support and empower you with these activities. However, again, this should not be the responsibility of residents. So the goal, excuse the formatting there, goals, we want poison-free weed control. And the only thing that makes sense is manual weed control. It's being done elsewhere all over the world, which I will show. We want to ban and phase out at a city level if government is lagging, if national government is lagging. We want to phase out highly hazardous pesticides in the city of Cape Town in the next 2 years. And that's not just weed control, that's all the uses for highly hazardous pesticides in the city of Cape Town. And we would like Cape Town to be a pesticide-free city in the next 5 years. So those are audacious goals, but we can do it. Moving on, because pesticides are not just about what happens on the verges and through municipal spraying. I just would like everybody to be cognizant of the fact that pesticides, herbicides are used at schools, in parks, in playgrounds. And this is an invitation for any of you that feel called to start becoming advocates at your schools. There are resources for you. Poison Free Peninsula and UnPoison can help. We can empower you. It would be great if there was a little working group to help schools with awareness and then also with solutions. It doesn't have to be aggressively attacking the powers that be. Often people just don't know. But I think that most parents would agree that they don't want their children exposed to harmful pesticides that can cause irreversible disease and harm at schools, which is supposed to be a place of safety. Next, residential weed and pest control. This is what happens in your garden. Please change to biological products and get super clued up about what you use. On the residential side, it's also looking at eco estates, golfing estates. I've had some horror stories of people living in conservation nature reserves where paraquat, which is deadly and going to be banned, where paraquat is used along the fence as weed control. That's just absolutely horrifying. People don't know. And these kinds of homeowners associations need to become clued up and need to change. So another big one is golf courses and pesticide use. So there was a study in South Africa, it was, I think, in 2010, that showed that 8 liters of herbicides were used approximately on golf courses compared to 1 liter in agricultural crops per year. And that is the cost of golf courses looking green, picture perfect. It's an aesthetic purpose. And this pesticides and the fertilizers leach out, there's runoff, they leach into the groundwater. Recently, there was a study done that people that live close to golf courses have a 126% higher risk of getting Parkinson's disease. And that includes people living 1 to 3 kilometers away from golf courses. So it would be great if there was another working group or advocates for pesticide use in sports and the various sports that could start doing more awareness, working with our groups to develop solutions, and then campaigning with these private organizations to make an impact to all of the people. And the golf courses are also always in really beautiful areas next to water or next, in our ecosystems. And there are other ways. So this is Vineyard Golf Course. It's the first organic golf course in the world. And there's a lot of information that they share. And there are a lot of other links that I have as well for any of you that are interested. I will be sharing links after this presentation. It's entirely possible. Lastly is our pets, our tick and flea control. I don't have an answer for that, but it's something to be mindful of. There was a study done in the UK that showed that there was a decline in the number of bird species as a result of dogs swimming in the water where the rivers and the dams and the lakes, etc., where there was habitat of birds. So it's something to be aware of. I know that just with the modern way that all of these sectors are run, sometimes they can prescribe more than what we need or more regularly. So that might just be something to question. We are living through a real life science experiment, and I'm not sure, we can already see how it's going. We're already seeing in our immediate families and everybody around us the burden of living in a toxic environment. And the good news is that there are pesticide-free towns and success stories. They're starting in the UK and in the EU. This is a map of pesticide-free towns or glyphosate-free towns in the UK. And more than, this is a slide on Germany, and Natalija's presentation will take us more into that. But this is the opportunity for people that sit in the city, the local government of our city, to reach out. We can create those linkages and learn from other cities about how they're doing it. If Cape Town is the best city in the world, then why aren't we leading these cities? And that brings me to the end of a very long presentation. My sincere apologies about that. I am now going to call on some of our area champions to share just a little bit about what they've done, 5 minutes each, so that you can hear from them. And please feel free to contact UnPoison, look at our website, and then you have Poison-Free Peninsula as well, on a local suburb level to get in touch with. Great, finally. Stop sharing. All right. So I would like to then call on Rachel Duffy or Mollison. Are you still on the call, Rachel?
I am. Yep, I'm here.
Great. If you wouldn't mind sharing 5 minutes about what your activity in Scarbs.
Yep, sure. Thank you for that opportunity. So yeah, as many of you might know, Scarborough is a conservation village and it's home to quite a very rich bio and ecosystem diversity. And we have a vast network of springs, small streams, and wetlands that ultimately drain into the Schusters River or the ocean. And Schuster's Flay, which lies downslope of the village, is a critically endangered wetland that supports, populations of plants, amphibians, and birds. And it's also been mapped as part of the City of Cape Town's biodiversity network as a critical biodiversity area of importance for the conservation of biodiversity in the city. And so, it was quite shocking that there was still spraying happening in Scarborough and Misty Cliffs. And it was in October, November 2023 that we first got in touch with the City of Cape Town and we requested an exemption based on, our ecological significance here in Scarborough. And we take our conservation village status seriously as a population. And we did a house-to-house poll of the residents of both Scarborough and Misty Cliffs and gained more than 93% of agreement that we did not want to have any more spraying of pesticides, herbicides in our village and community. And so, we sent this poll to the city alongside a plan for us to manually clear the weeds until the city could put in place a longer term and more sustainable solution for weed clearing that did not include chemical use. So what we're doing now is via the Scarborough Environment Group, we have a member of staff who is employed 1 day per week, and he clears the weeds manually from the paved roads in Scarborough. It's only the paved roads that we have to think about, worry about, as per the roads mandate. But he's currently clearing once a week so that we are able to be chemical free. And that is working. Obviously, Scarborough and Misty Cliffs is a small area, but nonetheless, it's working, very well. But we have to fund it ourselves, so we raise funding in order to cover the salary for that individual. So that's been our story since November 2023.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And Rachel has been amazing in sharing their process and in sharing tools and in collaborating to help the other suburbs become exempt. As I shared, the first prize is to get the city to take responsibility and change how they do things. But while we wait for that, although it's very difficult to organize suburbs, it is happening, and suburbs are resisting spraying with exemption. And Rachel's suburb is a great example of that. Angela, sorry to have kept you waiting so long. Would you like to talk about your activity in Muizenberg, which you are busy organizing and doing such a great job of with Tiana.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks for your
Great.
beautiful presentation. Really interesting. So I'm a Muizenberg resident. Can you hear me? I'm going to try and give you a short but thorough rundown of what's happened with us in Muizenberg. So I'm sure you all know Muizenberg. We're on the Zandvlei estuary and on the False Bay. I am a sculptor, and in my work as a sculptor, I've become increasingly aware of the toxicity of the manufacturing process. And through my work with Fynbos Life, I run a creative branch called Kuru Fynbos. Last year, we made sculptures of the Cape Galaxia subratus, a tiny little freshwater fish that used to be endemic across the Cape Peninsula rivers and is now almost impossible to find. And in that process, became super aware of what was happening with our wetlands, as you touched on. I also became aware through the mycelium network and the work of Heidi Swanby and the Cape Farm workers, what's going on in agriculture, and inspired by the work that they've been doing. Then I received the petition for poison-free Peninsula, and I think it was from Glen Cairn. So got very excited that people were doing work on the streets. Realized that actually what's happening with the city of Cape Town is that each area has to speak for themselves. So myself and Tiana Gubel, one of my colleagues, decided to take that on and essentially created a petition and worked very hard to try and beat the date that was set on the spray schedule of the city of Cape Town when it first came to our notice. And we really pushed hard. We've got a little group of poison-free Muizenberg workers that are working with us. And essentially in the space of 10 days, we managed to get about 500 signatures, not quite 500. When we were at about 250, we emailed Jade Olive from Rhodes, but it's still not received any communications back from that. We then had a really good meeting with our councillor, Isabel Sherry. We had been trying to connect with MIDS, and we had a meeting with Michael Latergan, who's the manager there, and David Bristow from Zandvlei Trust. So luckily we have Zandvlei Trust on our side. The city requires that we register a complaint through a registered organization. So that's one of the things that you have to do. But we came out of that meeting feeling rather despondent. And a couple of things were super apparent to us. And one of them is that the city of Cape Town was unwilling to discuss even the reallocation of budget that is at present being used for the control of weeds. We also understood that really what the story is they're trying to control the weeds in the water runoff system. So it's not just the roads, it's actually about water runoff. But the city of Cape Town also wants to the community to take all responsibility, as has come up a few times already. It also became apparent, so a few years ago in Muizenberg, the community actually working with MIDS got MIDS workers to stop using the sprayed poison on our roads.
Let's just be clear what MIDS is. It's the Muizenberg.
Oh, sorry, the Muizenberg Improvement District. So it's one of the SIDS, yeah. And they've done amazing work. And what we were really trying to do, and the suggestion is that small amount of budget allocation that sits with the city, actually we reallocate and give it to MIDS, and they can extend their already existing work. It felt like an easy win in that then the city didn't have to manage that process, that MIDS that was already managing that process could continue that. Anyway, then in discussion with the MIDS workers on the road, I discovered a couple of things. One of them is that the soft spray, which we've also been touting, which is a mixture of vinegar and detergent, is not an effective deterrent. Apparently it burns the leaves, but doesn't do anything to the roots. They also said that when there's a lot of water on the road, and these are people who are working on the actual road, when there's a lot of water runoff from the mountain or broken pipes of the city, That's where you get the biggest problem. We were also told that that if there were no weeds, that we wouldn't be sprayed. And that has led us feeling extremely frustrated and rather furious at this point, because a week ago, after all this work that we've been doing, we were requesting from our councillor the updated schedule of spray. We never received any warning, and the next moment, the day before these big storms, they came and sprayed us. And I know for myself, along my block, I had specifically made sure that there were no weeds, and yet we were still sprayed. So there is something that we really need to have a clear discussion about, is that if we actually cleaning our streets, that the city doesn't just come and spray. And the timing made me furious, because it was literally that afternoon before the big rain. So actually all they did was pour those toxic herbicides into our rivers and our ocean. And what was the point? Was it really to just get rid of the poison that they had paid for? So feeling rather aggravated myself, I have to confess. But at this point, we are still pushing onwards. We are working with UnPoison and the other poison-free Peninsula groups. We're in discussion with MIDS and trying to use the small mid section of Muizenberg to do a pilot, because it's easy to communicate with those people. The city is asking us to get a 90% buy-in from the community. That is not an easy thing to do. It's a lot of logistical work. We also have Fynbos Life, and as I say, Sunflake Trust, who has agreed to sign for us. We've got the Mycelium Network, the Clean Green Muizenberg, and the Friends of Muizenberg on our side. So ultimately, we really should be able to make clear forward motion. I also just discovered today through a friend and colleague of mine of something called IDP that perhaps we need to investigate. This is a municipal integrated development plan, whereby it says that it is actually government policy that the municipality is obliged to communicate with the communities to set up how the service delivery is managed. So that's something that I've just heard today. So yeah, I think we understand that the city wants us to take full responsibility. I personally feel we have to push back with that. We will do what we need to do to keep ourselves safe and unpoisoned, but actually taking responsibility fully means that in the more compromised places, of which there are many in our city, people are not going to be able to do that. And it sets a precedent that that's actually what's required. So this is not about champions, this is about our collective action, and we in Muizenberg are working with you all to create a living future for the city of Cape Town.
Yeah. Thank you, Angela. Incredible, incredible work. Amazing. You and Tiana have been super rock stars. So brilliant progress. Incredible.
Thank you.
Well done. Yeah, it's just really great to have your energy as part of it. And we will get Muizenberg exempt. We'll work together to get Muizenberg exempt. And we'll work to change those budgets. And next up, I am excited to share the pesticide-free towns in the EU. Natalija Svrtan is actually currently in meetings with the European Commission and in Warsaw. I asked her if she could pre-record her presentation, which she has kindly done. And it's really inspiring. So I'm going to play that presentation. I just am going to ask you whether you guys can hear the sound on it, because sometimes Zoom, there's an internal sound setting that needs to change where you can hear what I can hear.
Hello, my name is Natalija Svrtan. I work for Pesticide Action Network Europe. Pan-Europe is a non-profit organization based in Brussels and has 50 members across Europe. It is also part of a larger international PAN network. I would like to say a few words about how progressive European countries are working to minimize the negative effects of pesticide exposure on both citizens and the environment. In recent years, several European Union countries have implemented rules that limit or ban the use of pesticides in public spaces like parks, playgrounds, roads, and other communal areas. These measures aim to protect human health, preserve biodiversity, and promote sustainable urban environments. France has been at the forefront of this movement. Since January 2017, the use of pesticides has been prohibited in public green spaces, such as parks and gardens. This ban was extended in July 2022 to include private areas frequently accessed by the public, including residential properties like hotels, cemeteries, and sports facilities. Exceptions are made only for low-risk pesticides and for specific situations with no alternatives. Belgium has a regional approach. For example, in Flanders, a ban on pesticide use has been implemented in January 2015. In Wallonia, a similar ban is implemented from June 2019, following a 5-year transitional period. The city of Brussels has restricted the use in public areas in June 2013, with the full ban effective from January 2019. In 2024, Brussels announced the ban on the use of pesticides also in agricultural areas that will start from 2030. Sadly, the industry is suing the city of Brussels for this decision. Luxembourg introduced a comprehensive ban on pesticide use in public spaces in January 2016. The country has also prohibited use of glyphosate in agriculture since 2021, though the decision was challenged by the industry. Denmark began phasing out pesticides use in public areas in 1998, and since by 2007 it achieved a significant reduction. The Netherlands banned pesticide use on pavements from March 2016, extending the ban to other green areas by the end of 2017. Certain exemptions apply, but the country has made substantial progress in reducing pesticide use in urban areas. Germany prohibits pesticide use on non-agricultural land unless an exception is granted. So in Germany, over 550 municipalities have adopted measures to reduce or eliminate pesticide use in public spaces. Also, Italy is taking steps toward limiting the use of pesticides. For example, they banned the use of glyphosate in public areas in 2016. And local guidelines and national action plan supports the sustainable use of sustainable growth and sustainable maintenance, and encourages the municipalities to adopt pesticide-free practices. The concrete measures and actions I will explain on the examples of the city of Paris and the city of Zagreb. In recent years, the city of Paris has emerged as a leading example of how large urban areas can transition toward more sustainable and ecologically responsible management practices. The transition is rooted in the city's commitment to sustainable maintenance and biodiversity preservation and protection of public health. So the city of Paris, in maintaining of its parks, streetscapes, and green spaces, employs a set of integrated techniques that prioritize ecological approach. The chemical herbicides were replaced by mechanical and manual methods of weeding. For example, municipal workers use hose, thermal weeders, and have mechanical brushes to control weed growth on sidewalks and public paths. Also, instead of just destroying every plant that is considered to be a weed, the city now accepts more natural aesthetics that tolerates spontaneous vegetation and supports urban biodiversity, which actually requires less intervention for the city. Also, for example, they use cover plants such as thyme or clover to suppress weeds, and at the same time they're enhancing the soil's health and also the visual appeal of this area. And besides techniques, Paris engages its citizens through participatory greening projects. For example, there is an initiative named Permis de Végétaliser that grants residents the right to green small public spaces, for example, around the trees or around buildings. So they receive gardening kits and they get guidance how to maintain the area without pesticides, and this contributes to elimination of chemical substances and also helps raise the awareness of citizens about the impacts of pesticides on their health and on biodiversity. Also, farmers in Paris, they practice organic and agroecological farming. They are implementing integrated pest management to reduce the pest burden and to increase soil fertility. There is also another interesting project atop of the Paris Expo Porte de Versailles. It is called Nature Urbaine. This is one of the largest rooftop farms in Europe, and they use techniques such as raised beds with compost, rainwater harvesting systems, and companion planting to maximize yield in those limited spaces, and of course they don't use pesticides. There is also another good example in the city of Zagreb. The city of Zagreb actively promotes organic agriculture and sustainability through a combined approach that includes urban gardening, community engagement, and the implementation of nature-based solutions. In February 2018, the city of Zagreb joined the European Pesticide-Free Towns network by phasing out the synthetic pesticides from use in public urban spaces, thus becoming the first in the region to take this step. The decision was made to protect the health of citizens and increase the quality of life, and also to preserve nature and support biodiversity. To maintain public spaces, the city of Zagreb employs combination of mechanical, physical, and biological methods to manage vegetation and to promote ecological balance. Zagreb uses similar techniques as the city of Paris when it comes to maintenance of public spaces. So in line with its commitment to sustainable urban management, the city of Zagreb actively encourages the return of nature to the center of the city. So they are trying to teach the citizens that having a nature and having green areas and also having a bit of grass on hard surfaces is not bad, it's actually very good, and it helps promoting biodiversity. Emphasis is placed on planting and preserving native species, which are better adapted to the local environment and the climate, and they play a crucial role in maintaining ecological balance. And these practices help create habitats for pollinators and bees and butterflies, and this helps enhancing biodiversity in the city. Zagreb has also noticed that citizens desire to live healthy and to have safe environment, but also access to healthy and safe food. For this reason, in 2013, The city has come up with a project, the city-owned urban gardens across 10 locations in the city, and those gardens provide residents, especially those residents that do not own private land, to grow their own food and to cultivate their own organic produce. These gardens not only support healthy eating habitats, but also foster community interaction and environmental awareness. So to help citizens employ the organic practices, the city of Zagreb has collaborated with the Faculty of Agriculture in Zagreb, and they developed a manual titled Urban Organic Gardens. This manual contains practical advice for growing a large number of vegetable crops, and it describes the way to protect the crops without use of synthetic pesticides, and also provides information on how to prepare a compost. The soil in gardens is regularly tested to pesticide residues to ensure that the quality is maintained and to justify the trust of the citizens. Also, the city of Zagreb supports educational programs and community workshops to raise awareness about sustainable practices. So by promoting biodiversity and supporting urban agriculture, Zagreb enhances urban resilience and also nurtures a deeper connection between people and nature. So through these comprehensive strategies, Zagreb and Paris demonstrate a strong commitment to fostering sustainable urban living and promoting organic agriculture, and at the same time ensuring environmental benefits and improved quality of life for the residents. We hope your region will follow these examples.
Yay! Thank you, Natalija. So it can be done. If Paris and the Netherlands and cities all over the EU are going pesticide free, there's definitely a way forward for us. And there is so many great tips and initiatives that we can draw from and bring into conversations at an official level. It's now time for Debbie to talk about the poisons in our homes. If we're going to be looking at a poison-free city, this is one where we have sovereignty. So what happens in the borders of your own walls and in your homes, you don't need to be an activist for. You just need to learn more, become aware, and do things that might be inconvenient to completely change the contaminants and chemicals that you and your family are exposed to. Debbie, handing over to you. Debbie is the biodiversity control officer. Is that correct, for Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment?
Well, partly. I'm the jack of all trades for the department. So I'm actually the biodiversity officer control and the pesticide risk manager, amongst many other things. But for today, I am the pesticide risk manager for the department. Okay, so I'm going to take you through the dangers, the hidden dangers of domestic pesticides, looking at the birds and the bees and the whatever else. Okay, so moving on to the first slide. There you go. So the background that I'm going to give you is just basically on the domestic pesticides, the highly hazardous pesticides, effects on women and children, double standards and false advertising, which is a really big thing. Give a little bit on street pesticides, and then some closing remarks, mostly my own. Okay, so what are domestic pesticides? Pretty much everything you can buy on Amazon, Takealot, online, etc., in Pick and Pay, in Checkers, Builders. And there are pesticides that you use in your house to control insects and household pets, including your plants in your gardens. And they also include the products you use to clean your house. Now, most people don't think that pesticides, your household cleaning products are included, but some of the ingredients in those products are highly hazardous. So they are in the group of toxic chemicals, maybe not pesticides per se, but definitely toxic chemicals. So what is the problem? These are not safe. Everybody loves Doom, right? Well, here we go with Doom. Doom has 3 active ingredients in it. Diphenothrone, which is an endocrine disrupting chemical. It's a neurotox. It's a reproductive and developmental tox, and it causes eye damage. Peninsula, which is an ETOC, is toxic if ingested or inhaled. And what do you do with Doom? You spray it in your house to control pests. So my next question is, do you wear PPE? And I'm sure the answer is no.
Debbie, just remember about acronyms, and not everybody is familiar with what all the acronyms stand for.
Yes, I said endocrine disrupting chemicals, and peninsula, ETOC, ETOC is peninsula. And then
PPE is...
Sorry?
And PPE is protective gear and equipment.
Personal protective equipment. So your gloves, your goggles, your mask, the stuff you have to protect yourself against so that you don't get exposed to the pesticide active ingredients that are toxic. And then highly hazardous, and it's also a highly hazardous pesticide, and it's also a CMR, which stands for a carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reproductive tox pesticide. That's Doom. Now you have a Doom fogger. Everybody fogs their home when they go away for long holidays and they come back and they think there might be some sand fleas or something in the house. They fog their home. Okay, it also has 3 active ingredients. D-tetramethrin, cypionothrone, which is also an endocrine disrupting chemical. It's harmful if swallowed or inhaled. And what does Doom fogger give off? Fog, which what do you do with that? You inhale it. And pyriproxyfen, which is also an endocrine disrupting chemical, and it causes blood and liver toxicity. So, and both Doom fogger and Doom are toxic to bees and are harmful to aquatic environments. So why are you using a highly hazardous pesticide in your home? Are you storing it correctly? Are you putting it in your kitchen cupboard, which is next to your food? Are you storing under the sink in your kitchen with where it can then sort of react with other highly hazardous pesticides and other highly hazardous chemicals like your cleaning products? And are you wearing personal protective equipment, a mask, goggles, gloves to protect yourself? I guess the answer is no. So are you safeguarding your home, and at what cost are you safeguarding your home? Insecticides that are used to, so I'm going to give you some examples of insecticides that are used to control your household pets. Everybody knows Fiprogel. Hey, that's that lovely gel that you put down for cockroaches in your house. Well, Fiprogel is a roach gel, which is a severely hazardous pesticide. It bioaccumulates in your body. It is a neurotoxicant, an eye irritant. It is possibly carcinogenic. It's an endocrine disrupting chemical and a reproductive and developmental tox. It is highly toxic to mammals, we're mammals, and it is toxic to bees and birds and toxic to earthworms. So what does that mean? That means it is toxic to pretty much everything in the environment and in your garden. Where do you normally put your roach gel? You normally put it in front of your doors so that the cockroaches don't come into your house. So Where is it going to be toxic? It's going to be toxic towards you in your house, but it's also going to be toxic to the poor birds and bees and earthworms outside your house. So it's also a highly hazardous pesticide, and it's also a carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reproductive tox. Now, here comes Blue Death. Everybody loves Blue Death. It's that white powder you sprinkle all over like icing sugar in your garden when the wind is blowing. To kill insects that are eating your lovely roses or your chrysanthemums or whatever. It has 2 active ingredients. Permethrin, which is an endocrine disrupting chemical. It's a reproductive and developmental tox. It's a neurotox. It's an acetylcholinesterase exhibitor. It's a skin sensitizer, and it's an eye irritant. Okay, and it also contains carbaryl. Carbaryl is also an endocrine disrupting chemical, a reproductive and developmental tox, an acetylcholinesterase exhibitor, and a neurotox. But here's the fatal thing. It's fatal if inhaled, swallowed, or absorbed through the skin. So are you standing outside in summer in your short pants and your short sleeve shirt with no protection on your face or your arms or your legs and throwing your icing sugar all over your plants? Yes, again, highly hazardous pesticide, and it's a carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reproductive tox. So at what cost are you safeguarding your house? And who are you killing in the process? And here are a couple of others. Everybody loves that no insects indoors. Yes, everybody sprays that stuff for the insects indoors, for fleas and bed bugs and that sort of stuff. Well, it has 3 active ingredients. D-transylethrin, which is a pyrethroid, deltamethrin, which is a pyrethroid, and piperonal butoxide, which is synergist. They are all toxic to bees and wildlife, and it's toxic if inhaled, absorbed through the skin, and swallowed. So you're spraying this stuff all over your house for the ants and the cockroaches and the flies and whatever, because you don't want any insects indoors. And what are you doing? You are inhaling it while you're spraying it because you're not wearing a mask. And not a dust mask, people. A dust mask is for woodwork. It's not for pesticides. You're going to have to wear a proper mask, which is normally a respirator. So if you're spraying pesticides, you wear a respirator, not a dust mask. And then effecto ant. Everybody loves effecto ant, to try and get rid of your ants outside your house, and maybe some of them are coming inside your house. Well, it contains deltamethrin and piperonal butoxide are the 2 active ingredients. It's toxic if swallowed, inhaled, or absorbed through the skin. It's a skin irritant and sensitizer and an eye irritant, and it's toxic to bees, fish, wildlife, and aquatic organisms. So pretty much everything that lives outdoors. And have you ever considered safer alternatives for all these horrible things that you're spraying inside your house? Because I can guarantee you there are safer alternatives for all of the things that I've just shown you. And now Baygon. Everybody loves Baygon.
I can't see your screen, by the way. Are you still sharing?
You can't see my screen?
No.
I can see this.
Oh, okay.
I can see it.
Something wrong with my view. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so Baygon, multi-insect killer, because we don't want to get a can for flies and then another one for mosquitoes, whatever. We want one can that kills all. No sort of a one that kills everything. Well, you're going to be killing yourself in the process, because it's a real nasty one. It contains propoxur, which is an endocrine disrupting chemical. It's a possible carcinogenic, reproductive, and developmental tox. It's an acetylcholinesterase exhibitor. It's a neurotox. It's an eye irritant. It's highly toxic to humans, though that's us. It's also a highly hazardous pesticide. It's a carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reproductive tox. It is a groundwater contaminant, a marine pollutant, and it is used for household in the household and garden uses for lawns. Some people spray it on their lawns to control those crickets in your lawn, but hopefully no one will be spraying Baygon anymore. Are you sleeping peacefully? I don't think so. There are various control products for a peaceful sleep. Coils, mats, roll-ons, etc. So you've got your Doom, your peaceful sleep, your Tabard. So let's start with Doom. Doom is diphenhydramine. It's an endocrine disrupting chemical. It's a neurotox, and it's a respiratory tract irritant, and it causes eye damage. And that's your Doom. Those little Doom mosquito nets those mosquito coils that you burn, no, don't burn them. And then peaceful sleep is a prolethrine. It's toxic if ingested or inhaled, and it's toxic to bees and aquatic organisms. Peaceful sleep. And what do we put in children and babies' rooms to control the mosquitoes for babies? Peaceful sleep. So you're basically exposing those children to polythrin, which is not a good thing. And then Tabard, that nice little roll-on that we all use when we go to the beach, or we go to Durban, or we go to anywhere where there's a lot of mosquitoes. It contains dithiotoluamide, which is a DEET. It's a neurotox. It's a possible reproductive and developmental tox. It's a skin, eye, and respiratory tract irritant. It's toxic to mammals, that's us, and aquatic organisms. It's a highly hazardous pesticide. Again, a carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reproductive tox. Who's at risk for all these nice sleeping peacefully things? It is women. Women are at risk, children, and immune deficient people, and the elderly. And those are basically who we're trying to protect from mosquitoes. But at the same time, we're putting them at a huge risk of exposure to highly hazardous pesticides. Blindly caring for your pets? I don't think so. Do you know that carbodust, that lovely dust that you dust into your pets' beds and around where your pets sleep, is the same as Blue Death? It's the same active ingredient, carbaryl. So carbodust and Blue Death are the same thing. So you might as well just use Blue Death in your pets' beds. It's the same thing. It's an endocrine disrupting chemical. It's a reproductive and development tox. It's an acetylcholinesterase exhibitor, and it's a neurotox. So remember, this is applicable to you who's putting it into your cat's bed, or your dog's bed, or your chickens, with your chickens. So the people that actually put this in chicken coops, no. It's like putting Blue Death in chicken coops. So you are actually contaminating yourself and your domestic pets or your domestic animals. And it's generally used for ticks and fleas, and you apply it directly to their fur and you rub it in. So what are you doing? You're actually directly contaminating your pets when you apply it to their fur and rub it in. And it's also used for chickens. It's toxic if swallowed or inhaled, and you should avoid the inhalation dust. Now, how can you avoid the inhalation dust when you are putting it on your pet and you're rubbing it into his skin? Obviously, you will be inhaling that inhalation dust. It's toxic to fish and bees and wildlife, and it is a highly hazardous pesticide. It is also a CMR, carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reproductive tox. So Blue Death is toxic to mammals, cats and dogs, chickens, well, whoever. So why can you use one on your pets and not the other? Because they're the same thing, but they are marketed differently. So why the double standard? Because blue death and carbidus are the same thing, but they say that blue death is toxic because if you look on the label, it does have a skull and crossbones, but on the carbidus label, it does not. And it tells you you can use it on your pets. So that is a direct double standard. Controlling insects in your garden, snail ban. Everybody loves snail ban. You start throwing these little granules all over the place to kill your snails. Well, snail ban also contains carbaryl. The same thing that is contained in carbidust that you are dusting all over your pets. It is toxic to mammals and bioaccumulates. It's an endocrine disrupting chemical. It's a reproductive and developmental tox. It's a acetylcholinesterase exhibitor. It's a possible carcinogenic and neurotox pesticide. It's toxic to birds, bees, and aquatic organisms. It's a marine pollutant, and it's a PIC, a prior informed consent pesticide under the Rotterdam Convention, carbaryl. But you're dusting it on your pets and you're throwing it in the garden. And so who is scratching around in your flower beds where you've put your snail ban in to contain, to catch the snails that are eating your roses? Your animals, your domestic pets. The second active ingredient is metaldehyde, which is a groundwater pollutant. It's toxic to mammals, birds, and bees, and it's a possible reproductive and developmental tox. It's also a highly hazardous pesticide, and it's a carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reproductive tox. Snail ban, that you throw those nice little blue granules all over your garden. So controlling your pets in your garden again, insect granules. Those like they just called insect granules. That's all it's called by Effecto, for instance. That contains imidacloprid, which is a neonicotinoid, which is toxic to bees, to control your aphids, your spider mites, and your scale insects on your plants. It's toxic if ingested, inhaled, or absorbed through the skin. It's a genotoxic, and which means it's transgenerational. So you will develop a disease, possibly one of the cancers, and you will pass that over to your children. It's reproductive and developmental tox. It's a possible neurotox, and it's a kidney, liver, spleen, thyroid, and heart tox. Can you see that's pretty much all the essential, or all the major organs or essential organs in your body, and it's toxic to all of those. It's also a highly hazardous pesticide, and it's a carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reproductive tox. Then you have Dynest that you spray to get rid of your ants, I think. Yes. So this contains hydromethalnon, which bioaccumulates. It's toxic to mammals, birds, bees, and aquatic organisms. It's a reproductive and developmental tox. It's a possible carcinogenic and neurotox pesticide, and it's also an HHP, and it's highly hazardous pesticide, and there's a carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reproductive tox. So again, you are throwing things in your garden that's going to kill your pets, yourself, and the environment as a whole. So there goes the whole. There goes all the nature-based solutions down the toilet. Weeding out the risks. So now we're getting to how are we going to get rid of the weeds in our garden? The weeds in the garden, the weeds coming up in between your paving that is such annoying, etc. The products that are used to control weeds in your garden, scatter kill for weeds, because we're too lazy to mix a pesticide. So we'd rather just get the granules because it's easier. We can just throw them. Contains 2 active ingredients. Both are highly hazardous pesticides, and both are CMRs. Now you will notice, or you will identify these two, dicamba and MCPA, because these two also are used by the city of Cape Town to control their weeds. The first one is dicamba. It's an eye irritant. It's a possible carcinogen. It's a reproductive and developmental tox. It's a neurotox, and it's a respiratory and skin irritant. It's harmful if swallowed. It's a liver tox, and it's a groundwater contaminant. It's toxic to mammals, birds, bees, earthworms, aquatic organisms, and it's a bioaccumulative. So it accumulates in the aquatic food web as well as the terrestrial food web and in humans. MCPA is genotoxic, which means it's transgenerational. It's a potential reproductive and developmental tox. It's an eye irritant. It causes hypertension, kidney, liver, and blood toxicity, and it's a groundwater contaminant. It's toxic to mammals, birds, and earthworms. So that's the little scatter kill thingy you put out for the weeds that are coming up in your paving. No, not a good idea. Roundup ready to use, glyphosate as an isopropyl amine salt. Plus, what is in there? It's a glyphosate-based herbicide, which means it possibly contains polyethoxylated taloamine, which is the co-formulant in most Roundup products that is carcinogenic. It is eye damaging. It's a possible carcinogen. It's an endocrine disrupting chemical and a reproductive and developmental tox. It's toxic to birds, earthworms, and aquatic organisms. This is Roundup ready to use glyphosate. That nice one that you just buy in a bottle. You twist the lid, you twist that little spray nozzle, and off you go to kill everything. Are you trusting your cleaning products? Do you trust your cleaning products? Well, maybe you won't after this presentation. So there are three products everyone uses, but are they safe? The first one is Handy Andy. It's an isothiazolinone. Sometimes I can't pronounce these words. It is harmful if swallowed or inhaled. It's a skin irritant and a reactant. So have you ever, when you're using Handy Andy, get like a little irritation on your hands? And also, have you ever had like a little scratch in the back of your throat when you've been applying Handy Andy? It's an eye irritant and a cytotoxic pesticide. What does cytotoxic mean? It eats away at your skin. It's toxic to aquatic organisms. And if you notice I don't know if you can see my mouse, but if you notice on the Handy Andy bottle, they're clever. In this red square, if you can see over there, in that red square, where's my mouse now? In that red square on the Handy Andy bottle, there is a warning that you should wear protective clothing, personal protective equipment, like eye protection, a mask, and gloves. But it's written very, very small at the back of the Handy Andy bottle. But the registrar says it must be on the label. It's on the label. You just can't read it because it's written so small. Jay's fluid. Everybody loves Jay's fluid. It's a tar acid with 4-chlor-M-cresol. It's also an HHB, highly hazardous pesticide, and a CMR. It's a carcinogen, an endocrine disrupting chemical, a reproductive and developmental tox. It's toxic to aquatic organisms and mammals. What do we do with Jay's fluid? Do we throw it down our drains? Do we throw it down our toilets? Where do you think Jay's fluid ends up? In the aquatic environment. Drain power 3-in-1. People often buy it because it also comes in the bottle form. And all you do is you just put the nozzle down the drain and you pump it 3 times and it cleans your drain or unblocks your drain. It contains sodium hypochlorite and sodium hydroxide. It's a skin irritant. It's a skin, eye, and respiratory tract irritant. It's eye damaging. It's a skin corrosive, which means it will burn your skin. It's harmful by ingestion, inhalation, and skin contact. So you can't get that stuff on your skin and you can't breathe it in either. It is very toxic to aquatic invertebrates. So again, all of these products have got their hazard statements and their hazard warnings on, as indicated in those red squares, but the writing is so small that you can't see it unless you're looking really carefully for the hazard statements on those labels. So who is at most risk? Everybody that uses these products. Do you read the labels before you use these products? Does anybody bother reading the back of any of these products? to find out what their hazards and the exposure risks are. I guess many, not so many. So what about the death lurking in your kitchen cupboard where you store your Ratex or your Finale or whatever your rat poisons are? All the rat killing products are highly hazardous pesticides, and they're both WHO World Health Organization category 1A and 1B, which means they are acutely hazardous. Ratex is a brodifacoum. Brodifacoum has been banned. Finale is diphenthiolenone. It's been banned, but it hasn't been taken off the shelves yet because the chemical companies that produce Ratex and Finale have requested for derogations. Both are anticoagulants and secondary poisoners. What does that mean? It means that your blood does not clot, and your blood, so if you bleed, you just keep bleeding. Your blood does not clot. And it's a secondary poisoner, so the rat dies, and a bird sees the rat, and the bird eats the rat, and the bird dies. So it will kill whatever eats it. And it might just kill, so basically, let's say, for instance, a cat sees the rat and eats the bird, eats the rat, and then a bird sees the cat and eats the cat, the bird will also die. And also they are both reproductive and developmental toxins, but they can damage the unborn child. Who normally puts Ratex out in the house? Who normally buys the Ratex? Is it dad or is it mom? Just think about that. And it causes organ damage after repeated exposures. In other words, your organs start melting. It's toxic to birds and aquatic life. Personal protective equipment is needed when handling this product, not when applying this product, when handling it. So you shouldn't handle it without PPE. It is fatal if in contact with skin. In other words, it will be exposed. You will be exposed to it. It will be absorbed through your skin, and you will be exposed. Do you wear gloves when applying your little Ratex? Yes, I know some of them are granules, and you just open the box and you pour it out. But how do you close the box? Because normally there's that like little lid, the lip that you lift up and you pour your granules out, and then do you close that lip again? What are you closing it with? Your finger. Is your finger protected, or is it just your finger? Do you wear gloves? And as you can see here, again, with those little red circles, there is hazard statements on all of these products, but it's so small, you can't read it. And now we have for the snake oil merchants, which is a triple whammy. Here is one peddling highly hazardous pesticides under false labeling. He says here, low toxicity and enjoy a clean world. Green leaf powder, fly killing bait. Enjoy a clean world, and you see in that one square it says low toxicity, and the other square it says enjoy a clean world. Okay, but it is incorrect, as this is an organophosphate insecticide, which is supposed to be used as an anti-parasitic agent for veterinary use. So basically it's illegally traded, because do you see an Act 36L number on this product? No, because this comes in from China, which means it is illegally imported. If it even is, it's illegally imported into this country. It has false labeling because it is not an environmentally friendly product. It is a highly hazardous pesticide. It's an organophosphate pesticide, and the other labeling is fly killing. This is not for domestic use. It is for anti-parasitic use, for veterinary use. The active ingredient is azamethphos, which is a severely highly hazardous pesticide because it's a genotoxic acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. It's a neurotoxic, mutagenic, skin sensitizer, eye irritant. It's highly toxic to birds and bees and aquatic invertebrates, and a marine and freshwater pollutant. And it's intended to be used in cattle dips, not for household use. But you go to the China shop and you buy this fly killing bait to put out in your house to kill flies.
Debbie, I'm just going to give you a time thingy, if we can wrap up in 5 minutes.
No, I'm almost done.
Cool. Thank you.
I've got 2 slides left. So what's for sale at our local taxi rank? I'm not going to go too much into this because we have a speaker that's going to be talking about this. Illegal pesticides, concoctions, decanted agricultural pesticides, known as street pesticides. Excuse me. They are highly toxic and lead to many deaths a year, mostly women, because they are the decanters and sellers, and children, which are accidentally poisoned at home. The most commonly are either aldicarb, methimidofos, or clopyrifos, or the one that just hit the news lately, tebufos. They are all highly hazardous pesticides, and they all are carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reproductive toxins. But the bad thing is they are neurotoxic, reproductive toxicants, developmental toxicants. They have they create birth defects. They are dermatotoxic, and they cause cancer. So most street vendors and taxi rank vendors are women, placing them mostly at risk, and their children, which are with them. Because those little bottles that you see in that picture, that is clopyrifos, which is actually supposed to be a clear liquid, but when it comes into contact with sun, it becomes milky. So in that label, in that bottle that has no label, it looks like milk. So rise Mzansi with the EU double standards. EU bans pesticides citing environmental and human health concerns. But the EU countries manufacture the HHPs, then they ban and the ban restrict does not apply to the manufacturer. So they can manufacture these HHPs in Europe, and then they just export them to the African Union, to Africa. And these African countries then use these highly hazardous pesticides, which the EU has now imported into Africa onto their commodities, whether it's bananas or whatever. And then when they want to sell those bananas or export them back to the EU, the commodities are denied. The imports are denied because they say that the maximum residue levels have been exceeded because the EU has set their MRLs, their maximum residue levels, at undetectable levels, which means if you've used a highly hazardous pesticide on your commodity at any stage in that commodity's life cycle, it will be detected. Uganda has cited this as a civil rights violation, and they put a really good documentary together called "The Cancer You Eat." And if you just go to that YouTube link that I've put in the bottom there, you can view the whole documentary. I would really urge you all to have a look at that documentary. It's really powerful. So now, what does this all cost us? So the US, so Germany imports $63.4 million of pesticides into South Africa annually. Germany, $50.8 million, and France, $50.8 million into South Africa annually of highly hazardous pesticides. 50% of the imports are highly hazardous pesticides that were banned in the EU. 82.5 million HHPs, of HHPs are imported into South Africa from the EU annually. South Africa is the EU's largest trading partner in Africa. So what does that make? South Africa is the HHP springboard into the rest of Africa. So we are like the second EU when it comes to sending HHPs further on into Africa. So the global movement to ban and phase out highly hazardous pesticides, there is a huge movement, as you can see. The ICCM5 put a petition letter out to ban HHPs. Civil society and IPOs appealed to SAICM, now the Global Framework on Chemicals, to support phase out of HHPs. And then the excerpt from the United Nations repertoire's visit to South Africa also said we need to ban the HHPs. So let's tally up. Flying and crawling insects, aerosols and sprays, doom, fogger, bagon, no insects, dynest, exposure, inhalation, ingestion. There are HHPs, CMRs, they are toxic to women and children, all toxic if ingested or inhaled, but they are all vapors. Read the label, everyone. PPE, anyone. And they are toxic to bees. Multi-insect powders and granules, blue death, carbidus, snail ban, insecticide granules, plus flying killing bait Ratex, have many active ingredients in and have compounding risks. Exposure, inhalation, ingestion, dermal. They are highly hazardous pesticide, toxic to women and children. The carbaryl is a prior informed consent Rotterdam Convention pesticide, and blue death versus carbidus for pets and chickens. It's the same thing. Mosquito control, doom coils, peaceful sleep, knot, tabard, all have severe health impacts, most notably women, children, immune deficient, and elderly. Use alternatives, people. There's fever tree, there's citronella oil, or a mosquito net. False branding is rife. Handy Andy, green leaf, illegal street pesticides, aldicarb, chlorpyrifos, methimidofos, tebufos. The EU double standards exports their HSPs into African Union to the tune of $82.5 million US annually into South Africa alone. And the global move to ban HSPs is now, according to Ghana, a civil rights violation, which I completely agree with. And that is all I have to say today. Thank you.
Oh, Debbie, mic drop. Sure. Thank you so much for bringing the activism into our homes. That's what they say. They say charity starts at home. So I think it's time for everybody and to make their neighbors aware of the frontier that they need to win at home. There are alternatives, as you say. We might run out of time for the rat control discussion, and we might need to have that as a separate webinar, because something that needs to be discussed, unlike our European cities, is we also have our residential areas brushed up against townships and locations that have extremely high density, terrible waste control, and looking at solutions needs to be far more systemic than looking at product alternatives. So it's a conversation that's obviously being had also at the highest levels in different government departments. Debbie, if you wouldn't mind going back, there's some questions for you in the chat, specifically from Nanette from Poison Free Peninsula. And yeah, I think that is just a massive wake-up call for everybody. But there are greener products.
I'll do them now.
Thank you. I see Richard Hill has his hand up. Go for it, Richard.
Thank you, and thank you, Debbie. In Kierburn Park, we had an owl death a while back, and they took the dying owls to the vet, and the vet said definitely rat poison. The city has 66,000 of these bait stations across the city. So I looked into alternatives. Effecto says they have an eco-friendly one where the rats die in their burrows. I know it's not good for the rats, but does that work, Debbie? And has it got the same toxic effects as some of the other ones that you've mentioned? Thank you.
My suggestion would be cholecalciferol. The trade name is Icaret. Icaret is cholecalciferol. So yes, it comes in like a little bait block. The only issue I have with the cholecalciferol, I forget, I can't get to it's produced by BASF. I can't get the BASF name now, but Effecto makes a generic called Icaret. The little bait block is covered in plastic.
I'm very sorry the time is running extra late, and thank you both, Leslie Petrik, Professor Leslie Petrik, and Elroy for being patient. But these are invaluable information that's being brought into the public domain. So Professor Leslie Petrik of UWC, over to you about the urban pesticide load in our marine environments and in our rivers.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So I'm going to be speaking to you a little bit about the pesticides that we've measured up in our rivers and marine environment and tell you a little bit about some of the new work that we've done. I just want you to look at this particular image. This is the Deep River and the Milnerton Estuary, and it shows you that 24/7, 365-day effluent being discharged into our marine environment by the polluted rivers that are being contaminated by poorly functioning wastewater treatment plants. So just keep this image in mind. Should we worry about these chemical pollutants? And here you have the imported quantities that we're getting into our country, and I've only got up to 2019. I'm sure the volumes have gone up. And I think Debbie has told us a heck of a lot about the type of things that happen when you are exposed to these contaminants. Here is a not completely updated graphic, but it shows you the export of the banned pesticides from EU to different countries. And you can see that South Africa is one of the targeted countries that receives these jolly contaminants. Now, Debbie spoke to us about the toxicity of these materials, and we were trying to figure out how we can find a quick way to develop a way to see toxicity. So we've developed a human sperm model as an in vitro toxicity model, and we've just recently published that paper. And in that particular article, we show you how these contaminants of emerging concern are affecting sperm motility. Now, we did a whole lot of pharmaceuticals, but we also included a couple of pesticides in that. And here you can see the effect of atrazine. It's the one marked in yellow at the bottom there. And you can see that we are affecting the sperm motility at environmentally relevant concentrations of about 2 nanograms per mil of atrazine. We also did that particular study on external fertilizers such as the Crassotria gigas, which is your oyster. And here you can see the little oyster sperm that gets ejected into the environment. And you can see the tracks of these little oyster sperm when they're studied under microscope. And the spermatologists are able to analyze the tracks and see what happens to these sperm. And here you can see the effect of chlorpyrifos on the oyster sperm, and you can see that even at environmentally relevant concentrations such as 4.8 nanograms per mil, you are starting to see an impact on the sperm's vitality and mobility. A similar thing with atrazine. Here you have an enhancement of the sperm's motility, which is also disruptive. Now, that is a suggestion from us as to be able to deal with mixtures of contaminants as well. And if you read our paper, you will see that we've tested out mixtures of some of these contaminants to try and see how the toxicity works, because as you will see from the following slides, actually quantifying and identifying these contaminants in the environment is hugely difficult and expensive. Now, the question we were asking ourselves is, are these pesticides only found in agricultural environments? Because that's the kind of a normal thought. I'm not going to be speaking too much about volatilization and photodecomposition and spray drift, etc. I want to, for the next couple of slides, talk about how these pesticides can end up in our surface water or in our groundwater and in our oceans. So Debbie has shown us that we actually wage chemical warfare at home in numerous ways. And just to add to what she said there, we spray these pesticides around our homes, and then we let our children crawl on our floors and sleep on the linen that's full of these pesticides. We wash those surfaces down. That ends up in our drains and goes down to the wastewater treatment plant. And what we are asking ourselves is, do these chemicals of emerging concern escape through the wastewater treatment plants? And there are many of these contaminants of emerging concerns, which are in personal care products, in your pharmaceuticals, pesticides, and they also contain heavy metals. Now, we all know that South Africa has a dreadful problem with their wastewater treatment plants. Here you see some of the figures given by the Green Drop Report, and you can see that Western Cape is supposed to be pretty good compared to the rest of the country. But here's a typical example of some of our rivers that are contaminated with sewage effluent right here in Cape Town. You can see Table Mountain at the back. The city did a survey fairly recently, and they published that work. And here you can see them enumerating the amount of contaminants in the rivers and along our coastal environment. I'm not going to show you all our data. I'm just going to focus on the pesticides. But it does show you that the wastewater treatment plants are a significant source of contamination. Here are the wastewater treatment plants in Cape Town with the volumes that they're discharging. And you can see that they're situated around our Cape Flats area, along our False Bay coast. And then you have the three marine outfalls along our Atlantic seaboard. And just to point out that these wastewater treatment plants are really not functioning very well. The city has started a refurbishment program, and some of these are receiving attention, but we can expect this problem to last till 2020 at least, if the budget keeps being applied. 2030, sorry. That'll be the earliest we start to see some improvement on that. We did a chemical fingerprint study to see where this sewage ends up, right around our peninsula. And Cecilia, for instance, looked at all these organisms right around our peninsula, as well as the seawater and the sediment. And we've published extensively on this. So I'm just going to talk to you about the pesticides that she looked at. But she had a look at all these different compounds, your perfluorinated compounds, your industrial compounds, pharmaceutical compounds, metals, and then these herbicides. So just having a look at Camps Bay. Camps Bay is an isolated suburb. There's no manufacturing facilities there. So we should not be finding herbicides in the marine environment there. The little image I show you there on the left shows a picture on a day where a marine outfall sewage is being pushed against the coast and contaminating our coastline. We sampled, as you can see on this little map, we sampled along the beach and the surrounds along the side of the Camps Bay beach. And you can see with the seawater, we got low nanograms per liter content of these 5 herbicides: simazine, atrazine, alachlor, metallochlor, and butylochlor. When we looked at the sediments, the order of magnitude went up. And when we looked at the biota, it was even higher. So look at the y-axis to see what is happening in terms of these pesticides. We've actually published this work, and the city actually put out data around the sewage that is released via the Camps Bay pump station for atrazine and simazine. And when we looked at the mussels, we could see significant bioaccumulation of these pesticides in the mussels in that environment. And this is all household use or hotel use or spraying on the streets, because there just aren't any agricultural fields in Camps Bay. And when you look at the bioaccumulation factor of these herbicides, you can see that they are much greater than what it would be if it wasn't a problem. We went then to False Bay and not only sampled along the coastline, but we sampled deep into the marine environment at 30 meters and 50 meters depth. And here you can see these persistent contaminants in the seawater quite a couple of kilometers away from the coast. I want to point out here in this graph, we've got atrazine and metallochlore in the analysis, but they are not very prominent. You can see here that we're seeing far more of the pharmaceuticals here, like diclofenac and sulfamethoxazole and acetaminophen. So think about those headache pills you're taking and the stuff that you're rubbing on your muscles, because that's also going down into the marine environment. And a lot of it is getting stuck in the sediments. These were deep water sediments taken at 50 meters down, and they have these contaminants in. But as you can see, for instance, atrazine was measured here too, and it's not really showing up. So we went across to have a look whether we could find them in the fish. And Cecilia analyzed fish that we got from Cork Bay Harbour. And in those 4 fish species, that was your panga, your bonita, your snook, and your hottentot. And you can see in different parts of these organisms, these herbicides were appearing considerably higher than the background environmental concentration. We're also busy with herbicides and pesticides in non-perennial river catchment areas. And here you can see the nuwejaars, the heuningnest, and the verlorenvlei, which are agricultural areas. And in those areas, we actually found that the pesticides ranged from microgram per liter for things like carbaryl, metallochlore, simazine, pyromethanol, methomyl, oxymyl. Oh, I can't pronounce all these things. But so certainly in the agricultural environment, you can find traces of all these contaminants. But the interesting thing is that when you look at the riparian plant samples, it's a completely different amount profile of pesticides in the plants rather than in the river waters. And you can see that these plant samples are having milligrams per kilogram quantities of these contaminants in them. So certainly our agricultural areas are contaminating the perennial rivers and the riparian plants in that environment. And our colleague Reynold Chow and his team actually went and looked at 3 catchment areas, the Piketberg area, the Hex River Valley, and the Grabouw area. And they used Jonkershoek as a control site. And they measured 19 pharmaceutical compounds and 44 pesticides in those areas using passive sampling for quite a long time. So these were not grab samples, these were long-term analyses. And here you can see the seasonal variation of these selected pesticides in these different catchment areas. And you can see that the pesticides are definitely aligned with some of the spray seasons, but some of it was not actually aligned with the spray seasons. And very interestingly, when we looked at those catchment areas, we found that there was a very strong difference between the different catchment areas and the selected pharmaceuticals. So here you can see that Piketberg showed a lot more of these pharmaceuticals than the Hex River Valley or Grabouw. So you can see here that these pharmaceuticals are definitely urban contaminants, because these things, codeine and sulfamethoxazole, etc., are not used in the agricultural area at all. And you can see clearly that Piketberg is much more contaminated with the pharmaceuticals, whereas Hex River and Grabouw are not so heavily contaminated. And what was really interesting is that the pesticides and the pharmaceuticals tracked together when we looked at them in Piketberg in terms of the seasonal variation. And this actually points back to the catchment area image. If you have a look here, there are quite a few wastewater treatment plants in the Piketberg catchment area, whereas in the Hex River Valley, they're not similar wastewater treatment plants along that river. So here, this is, I think, a really irrefutable evidence that our pesticides are very often coming from our urban areas and not just from our agricultural areas, and that we actually really need to start interrogating our urban areas, because obviously, because of the high population density, we are actually using a large amount of pesticides. And finally, I just want to point out that these contaminants come back to us in our food, whether they're coming from agricultural or from an urban area. I showed you the fish are contaminated with these compounds, and certainly many of the plants that are being sprayed with this will be coming back to us, and we certainly are not testing plants that get sold in the local market, except maybe the Woolworths, for these contaminants in our food. So in conclusion, I think I've shown you that we can demonstrate the effect of this toxicity on human and oyster sperm. I've shown you that sewage effluents are contaminated with these persistent chemicals and pesticides, and that we can find a measurable presence of these pesticides and CECs in seawater sediments and in many different marine species, as well as in rivers, groundwater, and riparian plants. And it shows that urban contamination is a very large source of these pesticides, and that these things do bioaccumulate in living organisms much more than in the water or the sediments. So we really need to consider agricultural as well as urban usage. And one of the main points is that the combined effects of these concentrations are mostly unknown. And we've demonstrated their bioaccumulation up the trophic level. So we really need to take home these messages. These pesticides are in the marine organisms because we use them. They don't disappear after use, and this is something that people really need to understand. These pesticides do not degrade, and that's one reason why they are on the highly hazardous pesticide list. And they end up reappearing in the environment in unexpected places, and many of our species die-outs will be due to our overuse of chemicals, and that they do come back to us in our food and water, causing all kinds of metabolic problems, etc. So please think very carefully about your chemical usage. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Any
much,
questions?
Leslie, for that compelling presentation. I don't think anybody could leave today's webinar without making some kind of significant change at home or to lifestyle. You know, and that's it's shocking. So thank you, and that really demonstrates that we are connected to absolutely everything, and that we're not living in a little bubble. Let me turn on my video. That our homes and our neighborhoods and what we do, it's crazy. It's not just a little bubble between us and the wastewater and the trash heap. You know, we live in the environment that we're polluting. I think that there are a few questions for you in the chat, Leslie. If you can find the chat, you might just want to scroll up and see if there are some questions. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to encourage everybody to please go and check out waterstories.co.za. Professor Leslie Petrik is one of our most compelling and active activists around our water quality in Cape Town and for South Africa. And the work that she's done is invaluable and really important for us to follow and share, and to ensure that the work that she's advocating for, which is around wastewater plants and treatments, it's all linked. If the wastewater plants aren't removing all of these chemicals from the water, where it's coming back to us in how it's recycled. So these are all interlinked discussions. We're living in an ecosystem of sectors and departments and industries, as well as the natural environment. Okay, so great. We've got more than enough time to get everything done. Elroy, there's absolutely no need for you to rush. If you are ready, I would love to invite you to talk about one of the most important topics, because not only Cape Town, but South Africa is very much a tale of two cities. And it's very easy for us that are on the webinar to talk about going poison free and all of the alternatives that we can implement in our homes. But for the vast majority of South Africans, especially those that live in townships and locations in very crowded, unsanitized, or areas that don't get service delivery, it's a very, very, very different world. And the challenges and solutions are completely different, all integrated, but completely different to the conversations that many of us, or the reality that many of us on this actual call face. So thank you so much for joining us, Elroy, and thank you for your patience.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elroy Plaatjies. I'm an environmental health practitioner. For those a bit older, we were used to call environmental health inspectors. So I'm working for the City of Cape Town municipality, and for the last 20 plus years, I've been focusing on urban health, and with a specific focus on rodent control. And at some stage, I've moved as a focus area, chemical safety. Currently, I'm responsible for managing the Klipfontein area, which is Athlone and Guguletu region, in terms of environmental health, or what is referred to in legislation as municipal health. So that is my introduction of myself. And Anna invited me to do a presentation on the surveillance of poisons from a municipal health perspective. I think most of the previous speakers covered the aspect of defining the problem. And I think we all have knowledge on the exposure, but I'll just maybe rush through. Most of pesticides or poisoning occur when an individual is exposed to a contaminated substance or directly ingests harmful substance. And the routes of exposure commonly is ingestion, absorption, and inhalation. I think Debbie covered this entire topic on pesticides very well. I think to save time, I might skip this slide in terms of time and move to the more important elements, which I think is the determinants of exposure within an urban perspective. And when I say urban perspective, I refer to the City of Cape Town and surrounds. So why do people get poisoned? It's due to easy access. Most of our poisons are bought from street vendors, or what we refer to as illegal street pesticides. I think the poor living conditions, the poverty, and there's a correlation between poverty and living conditions. And then people use these easily available hazardous chemicals or pesticides, rodenticides, as a means to control pests, and mostly for rodents, because the rodents have economic impact. It has a health impact within those dwellings, be it formal or informal. I also think that, in my view, we have a very poor regulatory environment. And I think previous speakers have hammered on this item, where we have very poor regulation in terms of the legal frameworks that is available to our country. At a later slide, I will indicate those frameworks. People using these pesticides have limited knowledge, formal or informal, rich or poor. We have a knowledge deficit, I think, in terms of pesticides. and it has an impact on why people get poisoned. And then obviously the most well-known route of exposure is through harmful working conditions. And this moves me to the outcomes of exposure, and this is the field where I work in mostly. And this deals with the organophosphate poisonings and chemical poisonings as referred to. So I think everybody is aware of this case study, or let me rather refer to it as a high-profile case study that happened on October the 6th in 2024, when 5 children died after eating snacks purchased from a local informal spaza shop, and another child died 5 days later from the organophosphate poisoning. And this specific case had massive traction in the media, locally and internationally, and we even had our then Minister of Health discussing the issue, and it later ended even in our President Cyril Ramaphosa stating that the poisoning is now classified as an emergency within our government. Just on this slide, I've taken out the visual aspects of the kids, but most of my kids are at this age, just as a reference. And one, I must also credit Professor Leslie London for this slide. I think he used this, and I've asked him permission to use this slide. But the context of the slide for me is so personal, as these kids, the ages are the ages of my kids, and these kids are no more due to the topic that we are discussing today, preventable and a reality in South Africa, and we like to define it as an outcome of exposure to hazardous chemicals. So for some context, I've had a look at this slide. The World Health had a look at the global statistics for 2023 and unintentional poisoning. So according to them, that the mortality rates by gender shows that the rates of deaths due to unintentional poisoning as a result of occupational exposure is higher among men than women globally. And that the analysis shows that the gap between gender exposure has narrowed. This is a global picture, and I will now, for context, move to our local context, and it will give, I hope it provides a perspective or an improved perspective. So the slide focuses on the epidemiology of agricultural stock remedy poisoning in the metro, which is just the city of Cape Town municipality. So the data was reviewed. The slide was prepared by our epidemiologist. Just want to acknowledge her as well. It's Dr. Natasha Berkovich. And we picked up the data from the National Institute of Communicable Diseases. They have an app monitoring the notifiable medical conditions. And we prefer to use the data from 2018 to 2024 just to highlight the number of pesticide poisonings from 2018. And as you can notice, there's a gradual and significant increase as we progress to 2022, 23, 24, when last year we ended off with 90 plus cases of pesticide poisoning. And you must note, this is only in the city of Cape Town municipal boundary, which is a shocker if you look at the 2018, 2019, and the reduction even in 2021. So over 200 cases were reported, and another shocking element is that mostly in the young children, we found the accidental poisonings and young adults. And the question can be raised, is it work-related, mental health-related? Those are open-ended questions. I think some research has been done. It's available on the slide for you to have a look at. And the age breakdown refers to, if you look at the slide, that you have cases for agricultural stock remedy poisoning or chemical poisoning for an age range of 0 to 40 months, infant stage. So it's impossible that those kids could be working And then you have 0 to 4, it's almost 50 cases. 5 to 9, 10 to 14 age group, we see that those are the majority in terms of age breakdown. And if we go back to that analysis of the World Health Organization, you can see the focus refers to gender exposure. And the reality in South Africa is we have a far bigger problem because it seems our children are far more exposed to chemicals than our adults. And I think most of our notifications come from our regional hospitals and our academic hospitals. If you look at the slide at the bottom with it shows you that most of these cases are most likely to be referrals from your clinics. However, we note that in Khayelitsha there's been some where they've identified the cases at a clinic level, and that is not a good indicator. And groter skin, which is plain, and the bigger
Elroy,
hospitals.
sorry to
Yes.
interrupt you. There's just a little notification that says the app Zoom as is sharing your screen. Won't you hide it? Because it's just over some of your data. Thank you.
Apologies.
And
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to echo how absolutely tragic that statistic is of 0 to 4 years old, and there's 50 deaths there. It's like heartbreaking.
Yes. I wanted to make it a separate slide, but I think we will maybe at a later stage we can delve into some analysis of that data because it requires further analysis. It's not a simplified issue, and it's even borders on the criminality of what's happening between 0 to 4 and 5 to 9 even. So just back to the notifying facilities is that there's a lot of underreporting also taking place, and there is some confusion within some of these sectors, and that's why we could be having underreporting of some of these hospitals and in health facilities, as many of the doctors only pick up on the organophosphates and they miss out on the other chemical poisonings taking place. And that's an issue of training that we're also trying to look at. Then this is the biggest focus for me from an environmental health perspective or a municipal health perspective is that the surveillance of poisoning is technically our mandate. And here's the legislative context. I think Dept covered the international legal frameworks, which is the Rotterdam Convention on Prior Informed Consent and the International Code of Conduct in Pesticides Management and the IHRs that we have in place. But I think the more interesting for me is the local context that we have the National Health Act, which is the primary act for the Department of Health, from which we derive our mandate. Our mandate is basically what we can do and what we cannot do. And it makes provision for the minister to make regulations in terms of notifiable medical conditions. And agricultural stock remedy poisoning is a notifiable medical condition or NMC. So there's a list of diseases that you need to investigate if it is listed, and agricultural stock remedy poisoning is still a notifiable medical condition. You would note the definition does not refer to chemical poisoning, also something that we always wanted to be clarified, specifically that the agricultural stock remedy definition actually comes from a very outdated and old regulation. I think it was, rather not, but I think that the definition or the term is no longer valid. We also have the Hazardous Substance Act of 1993 that we can make use of. You will note that it only mandates notifying of cases of poisoning involving pesticides and hazardous substances. So just a technical issue there. We are only mandated to notify cases, and we do not have the authority to remove these pesticides from these street markets. And the department mandated with that authority is the Department of Agriculture at this stage. We've tried various mechanisms and to activate SAPs and local law enforcement units to remove these items, but it has not worked out the way we wanted to. And currently we make use of the Department of Agriculture to remove these pesticides or hazardous substances. Just a technical issue, but it would give some perspective on the limitations that we have to work with due to our local legal framework. The regulation for surveillance and control of notifiable medical conditions, I think I referred to it. It includes pesticide poisoning as a notifiable condition. Regulation 16 outlines that the role of the environmental health practitioner is to investigate and controlling notifiable medical conditions. Again, some legal context. Controlling notifiable medical conditions does not give you much to work on if you do not have the legal mandate. Because how would you control? Only through coordination and not actively enforcing these rules. And in this example of hazardous substances, it literally means I cannot go to any market and remove hazardous chemicals. I need to make a request to the Department of Agriculture to remove or control these substances. And there's only 3 officers working in the entire province, to give context. We also have the National Environmental Health Norms and Standards document, which just provides some guidance in terms of pesticide poisoning and reporting. It's not so valuable. And then in our scope of profession and for environmental health, our EHPs oversee pesticide safety, monitoring, public education on chemical hazards. This is just an example of the context in terms of the urban setting. These pesticides were designed for use in an agricultural setting, as you can see in the picture on the left. As non-compliant as that person is, it was designed for that setting. But in the urban setting, on the right-hand side picture, you would note that there's a group of pesticides there that is not supposed to be available in a residential area, on a market level, on a street level, to be sold off for residential use or home use. Most of the items on that table or some of the items on the table is scheduled only for agricultural use or commercial use, and not for somebody to go use an organophosphate Dept to kill off rats on their properties. I remember this picture taken with Professor Rother many years ago. I recall the picture. This slide deals with a medical matrix on how to define cases. There's a clinical case definition, there is a confirmed case definition, and a probable case definition. I'm not too sure if I go into detail, but I just wanted to explain or give context to the fact that what we deal with in the field, it's when somebody say they are poisoned, they need to they must satisfy one criterion in each category listed. So for each definition or case definition, there's a list of criteria that they need to comply with. And I think the most difficult case definition to comply with or to be identified is the confirmed case definition, because it involves also the laboratory assessment or laboratory test demonstrating physiological response to the pesticide. And that is something that we've struggled with. We don't always have the results to confirm these cases. And most of the cases that we deal with are suspected cases or clinical suspected cases or probable cases. And this is something technical that we struggle with when we do investigate these cases. I will not delve into the detail. Natasha designed this little pop-up just to state that the confirmed case definition now, or confirmed cases, have now been listed as a category 1 condition, which means that this case needs to be notified and investigated within 24 hours. Then, as environmental health, we admit that there are issues with surveillance of data, and even on these case investigations, we have a lot of misdiagnosis from our facilities, health facilities, local, provincial, national. Symptoms are missed, lab tests are not done or not available, as discussed in the previous slide. poor recording of exposure by clinicians. That's a reality. Our databases do not sync, hence we didn't use the data for 2025. We have some issues there. And then we have poor data quality. Tools to capture are vast and poorly completed. We have suicide attempts recorded more frequently than occupational exposure, which is totally a different element that we do not want to bring in with our data on chemical poisonings. We would like to keep it separate, very difficult to do, obvious reasons. And then surveillance and data are not just used for the risk reduction strategies, or the data is not used for risk reduction strategies or to inform policy. And that's a huge issue for us. So we have data stretching back as far as 2010, and we have not seen an improved risk reduction strategy or policy change thus far. Investigation of suspected poisoning cases. This is exactly what takes place on a local level within our municipality. Our environmental health practitioners go out and do case surveillance. They receive and record the case. They look for patterns in the poisoning cases, keep a line list, complete appropriate forms, pesticide or chemical incident report forms. They do lead exposure and poisoning information forms. They send forms to the province, the district EHP coordinator, not the CDC. And then we feed back to the health facility and practitioner notified. That seems all good and well, but if you consider the number of cases received, and then you consider this processing, does it really stop the problem, or do we just gather data? That's the question. And then the second part is to have an effective investigation. Seems simple, it's not simple. The location, persons involved, types of poison source of exposure as well. One example, if you do these types of investigations within an informal setting or an area of informality, where there's no streets, there's no house numbers, it becomes very difficult. There's safety concerns for staff. Most of our staff are females. So effective investigation is also a challenge that we sit with. Chemical risk assessment. We are supposed to collect information on the type, nature, and trade name of active ingredients, individual groups, and at risk. Maybe just a good light point, maybe, or highlight in my career was working with Andrea, I think she's on the call, and Professor London, when we developed a chemical risk assessment material, information sheets for professionals, as well as on a community level or public awareness level. Maybe Andrea can give access through UCT to this group, that type of information. I think it's something that we have not shared too much, and we should share more of it, and even look at redeveloping chemical risk assessment information to professionals and to members of the public. Also listening to Debbie earlier, she listed almost all the pesticides as hazardous chemicals, and it would be a very good exercise if we could perhaps share that information on the chemical risk assessment information that was developed in that period. That information is available and can be shared, Anna, through Professor Rother. Compound risk, occupation, home or environmental exposure. We collect samples, we interpret lab results. Another issue here is that we should be able to interpret lab results, but how do we analyze for the hazardous compounds and substances that we find? We have not yet had a successful lab analysis of the samples that we have submitted to labs in Cape Town, due to the mixing and the high toxicity levels of the chemicals being sold in the illegal street markets. We also involve other departments, and mostly we work with the Department of Agriculture, although they have limited human resource or manpower to actually cover the entire province. Public education, our main focus, I've explained that. We have communication We do communicate the risk to the public. We try to explain even to the traders, or we try to explain to traders that they are actually dealing with the hazardous chemicals, and it's not just a substance that you can handle as a normal household chemical. These chemicals are hazardous. We've conducted stakeholder engagement. This has not proven to be successful. If you look at the previous slide where our number of pesticide poisonings have increased, it has not decreased. So that's already is an indicator that our public education is not optimal. We also have intervention measures. We implement control measures. This would normally be a raid with the South African Police Services, the Department of Agriculture. I'll show later on how that looks like. We also try to involve law enforcement if necessary or if required, but that is also a challenge as SAPs do have constraints in terms of investigation and human resources as well. And that chemical safety is not, at the time, previously was not considered a priority crime or priority issue. So this is the ideal that we want to work towards. It is not yet where we want it to be, but since the president has stated called the food poisoning cases or the chemical poisoning cases as an emergency, we've had some form of improved access to the South African Police Services. We have access now to the Department of Health and to the Department of Agriculture, but practically it might seem good on paper, but on a practical level, within the Western Province, you've got multiple municipalities, and if you expect 3 people to cover multiples of municipalities, it indicates a shortfall of manpower, and therefore, again, then you will be limited in terms of your operations to remove these hazardous chemicals or pesticides. This slide just indicates how it looks on a practical. I think the pictures are not looking too good on my side now, but it merely indicates what is done. The people in blue, or the blue City of Cape Town uniform, environmental health practitioners actively now going on a raid with law enforcement, South African Police Services, and with Department of Agriculture, going from point to point to remove and hazardous pesticides or chemicals from all vendors, sellers, street vendors, with the desired impact to inform, educate, and remove the pesticides from the street. However, it's highly ineffective, as from the one week to the next week, we just find the same vendors each time selling the same chemicals. And the chemicals range normally from organophosphates to all the lists that Debbie explained earlier. I don't think I have a slide here now on the specific presentation on the types of pesticides that we pick up, but it's the full range. The other mechanism that we have for prevention is risk communication. I think there's material available. I've explained UCT has a catalog of material that we can make use of. There's the labeling issue. I don't think that's been very helpful, even on a commercial level, because people do not read labels. To read a label is very complex, and you need knowledge of the technical terms used. Even the color of the labels is an issue. Technology and design of packaging and formulation, that obviously, I think you discussed it earlier. If you start using chemicals which is less hazardous, that would be an improvement. Operational control deals with occupational exposure. That is dealing when you deal with the vendors selling these pesticides. We try to move them to alternative means. Example, the rat cages or the rat traps. I think this was research again done by UCT and Professor Rother, and the study they conducted proved that rat traps is the most effective means of controlling rats. Very difficult for a municipality to institute that type of control measure because of the legal liability in case a child's foot gets stuck into those traps. the municipality will be held liable. However, we found that that is the most effective means of controlling rodents. There's health surveillance, legislation, regulation, and law enforcement. And those elements are failing at this stage. If you look at the data analysis provided, cases are increasing. We are not stopping this slide into a disaster or tragedy, another 5 kids. So it is a failure on legislation, regulation, and enforcement side. In conclusion, poison is preventable but requires a multidisciplinary or whole of society response, as we're trying to do today. The determinants of poisonings are related to persons' living circumstances, social context, and policy environment. Prevention is better than cure, and an effective response relies on adequate data generated from timely notifications and thorough investigation of all cases. Thank you. And I just want to acknowledge again Dr. Natasha Berkovich and Professor Leslie London for borrowing some of their slides. Thank you.
Thank you for a most excellent presentation, Elroy. It was really very practical, and it also gave us quite an insight into the mechanisms behind how everything works and how everything works at a city level. And I hope that it can help to energize the conversations with the right people, because there are a lot of people in this chat. I hope that it can accelerate and energize more of those conversations around reporting and improving all of the mechanisms. One of the things that we became aware of with the tuberphos poisonings as well was that Department of Agriculture didn't have access to that poisoning information at their fingertips. And I think, yeah, there's so much, the fact that all of these departments, that it's all fragmented and works in silos between departments and even between national, provincial, municipal, all of these kinds of things. There's just so many broken links in it, and it's a great opportunity to improve. So I'm really glad that I asked you to join us and kept nagging you. You were an essential round off to our discussion. So thank you. I think there are questions for you. I'm not sure if you want to share your email address, just in case anybody wants to email you. You probably won't have time for lots of inquiries. I will certainly be sharing all of the slides. Elroy, I'm not sure if there are any questions for you in the chat. You might just want to scroll up. So I'm really glad that I scheduled 3 hours and didn't have a last speaker. Everybody that wants to jump off is more than welcome. I am going to move on to the rat control discussion. And we'll have that maybe for 15 minutes running over time. And it's probably a nudge to host a webinar specifically on rat control. I think it's such a complex issue. Sorry, Lisa is asking, how will the slides and presentations be shared? Please email unpoisonsa@gmail.com. Yeah, everybody that wants the presentations, etc., I will share a link to all of the information that was shared on this webinar today. And of course, if somebody from Poison Free Peninsula can share that email address, I think it's poisonfreepeninsula@proton.me. That's about getting involved at a suburb level. Okay. So in putting this webinar together, I reached out to some pest controllers and green rat and pest controllers, etc. And there was reluctance to join the webinar. I think there could be industry pressure or backlash, or people aren't sure exactly about whether they would say the right thing or get criticized. But I learned a lot of really interesting information from having a conversation. And I just put onto another presentation in the background some of the topics for discussion. So I don't have answers. What I'm going to present is not factual necessarily. It's not prescriptive. It's just to discuss the things that I discussed with the pest controller. Okay, so rodenticides and rat control. So I think a lot of the acute poisonings on Elroy's slide would possibly come from the rat and pest control side. Please jump in, guys. This is just a discussion. Talking about rats and pests, cockroaches and flies and rats, etc. My experience with rats is I live in the Southern Peninsula, and it's a very natural rural area, and naturally living so close to the natural environment, there are all kinds of species, field mice and geckos and owls and mongoose and of course rats as well. And every now and then there is a rat that comes and terrorizes me, or two. And on one occasion, I had a rat run over my head while I was sleeping at night. But I just want to talk a little bit about a reality in the townships, and that is plagues of rats running over people at night, running over children, biting toes. How do you keep your food? How do you keep everything sanitized? I think it's something that those of us that live in suburbs are just really, really ignorant to. I'm going to scoot through my slides and ignore the hands up and come back to you. So from my discussion with the pest control person, how rodenticides work is that there's a single feed, which means that it will kill the rat with one feed, the rat will eat and then it will die. And those are really dangerous and not what we want to be using, from my limited understanding. And then there are multi-feeds, and that takes about 3 separate feeding occasions for the rats. And if we're talking about poisons, living in an urban context, I am very much UnPoison, but also we need to be realistic. And look at the solutions realistically from an urban space. Are some poisons on the table for what we need to discuss, especially considering the tale of two cities, which is not, which doesn't necessarily have the privilege of green products. So throwing it out there. I was notified, now this is for commercial, apparently the V&A waterfront uses this amazing thing, and it's called EcoMill, and it can take up to 50 rats, I think, and as soon as they go in that thing, they get sanitized, there's no smell, they get sanitized, they die. It's very expensive, so it's only, there's a barrier for who might be able to use it. But this is an option, and apparently it's the most effective, and apparently it's the most humane and the most sanitized option out there for commercial hospitality installations. At home, without pesticides, there are these products that I've become aware of, which I think will electrocute the rat, possibly. Just put in the chat. And so you don't need to keep adding poisons. One, there's the cost thing of adding poisons. And two, obviously the secondary poisoning of all of the fauna. And then we've got the rat traps where you hang a little bit of food in it. These are humane. They don't kill the rat. It's just quite a lot of admin. I have used, and we do use these from time to time. The rats are quite clever though about the food that you put in the trap, and then the gate of the trap comes down, and the rat or the mouse is still alive, and then you drive it somewhere and you let it go to enjoy the rest of its life or go and terrorize someone else. Next presentation. Whoopsie. Next slide. Next sheet. Okay, so then Debbie spoke about Effecto. This is, I believe, is it a single feed, Debbie? You can just shout out, Debbie. I don't mind you butting in. I do.
Yeah. That is That is a single feed cholecalciferol based product. It's a green product. There's no secondary poisonings. It takes one bite and goes off and dies. How it works is it eats the bait and then it doesn't feel hungry anymore. So it takes away its hunger. Its lust for food. And then it basically dies of starvation.
So
Basically.
thank you. What the pest control person told me is that it's a lesser evil, but a dog or a cat would die if they ate the whole. So it's not necessarily pet safe. So if your dog or your cat, if you put it in a place where another animal can eat a whole tablet, there's a possibility that your animal would die. So that dose is enough to kill an animal. I'm not sure what the toxicity risks are for a small child having a full dose. So that's just something also to flag.
Well, it's a cholecalciferol. So basically it's vitamin K.
Or D.
So it's an overdose of vitamin K.
Okay, so there was the pest control person that I spoke to discussed something different, which was like a powder that goes on the rat's feet. He said it was on the substance of concern list, but it's a multi-feed, or they go on where the application is. It could be, and it's a little powder.
And it's a HHP.
Okay, and then the rat licks its feet a few times, and then when it cleans itself.
It's an HHP, definicum. It's on our HHP list.
Okay, and then something that is the elephant in the room is density and poverty, and it comes down to not pest control more than waste management, and also our urban systems. And I think that we can't be having a pesticide conversation, especially when it comes to rodenticides, if we don't have a waste management conversation at the same time, which links to services, etc.
Anna?
Yes.
What you've left out is ovo control.
What is that?
It is also a bait.
Okay.
But it sterilizes the males and female rats, so they don't make babies.
How do we spell it?
Ovo control. OVO, capital C, control. Ovo control.
Okay.
So it's basically it's like the horn. It's like the pill for a rat.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Debbie. And I'm going to stop sharing because I think...
Just for interest sake, it was used on Marion Island on the cats.
Okay.
When there was a cat outbreak on Marion Island, it was used on the cats on Marion Island to decrease the population before the hunters came in and shot out the last remaining cats.
Okay, thank you.
I hope no one from SPCA is on the line.
I did see somebody from Tears. Okay, so then that brings us to a discussion on highly hazardous pesticides. The pest control person was very concerned that with taking some of these pesticides that they felt were less harmful as multi-feed products or pesticides, that it could lead to a rat plague. And that's obviously a really important discussion to have. So how prepared are we for rat control when these... and as somebody that is one of the leaders of the highly hazardous pesticide phase-out campaign, I'm being very transparent in asking that question. So I'm not to be hypocritical. Yeah.
There are substitutes. There are alternatives, and the one is the cholecalciferol, which is a single bait or single use non-secondary poisoner.
Right.
So it doesn't kill anything that eats the rat, and the ovo control. If you're looking at chemicals, and then there's obviously the trapping and baiting, which is the rat stations, and the most successful one is not those horrible traps. It's the Sherman trap, which is that metal trap where he comes in and eats his peanut butter and it snaps closed behind him. That one.
This one,
there.
yeah.
That one, yes, that one on the end. These other ones in the beginning, they are the number 1 and number 2 outdoor electric rat trap. That's not SPCA compliant.
Okay.
And the live catch mouse trap's not SPCA compliant because he suffocates in there. He doesn't get air in that one. But these Sherman traps, at least he can breathe and he's okay in there until you take him out and snap his neck.
Okay.
Or whatever.
So, we're talking to the SPCA here, and
no, I'm being brutally honest.
Yeah, so me too. I'm also trying to be brutally honest because when you have a rat infestation in your home, you get faced with some very uncomfortable questions. Okay, so I think and then I raised the question of highly hazardous pesticides. So what are our alternatives? Something that obviously, needs a very in-depth discussion. And that's all those are all of my prompts for this discussion. And I'm going to stop sharing. And if there's anybody that wants to, Richard, please go ahead. And anybody else, don't be polite. Let's just treat this as an actual discussion. You can unmute yourselves and we can discuss.
Thanks, Anna, for a brilliant afternoon. So as the councillor for Ward 58, that's Rondebosch, Claremont and Kenilworth, I first picked this up of the rodent bait stations in a sub-council meeting late last year. And as I said earlier in this meeting, there's 66,000 of them that the city keeps filling up with the rat bait. I have been driving this issue within the city, and I've been in touch with the new mayoral committee member for community services and health, Francine Hyam, who's very open to these kind of environmental and sustainability issues. I'm very pleased to meet Elroy Plaatjies this afternoon. And on another matter, which is the use of the glyphosate poisoning to get rid of grass in the streets, I'm working on that one as well. But I was told recently that the city has their tenders out, which will run for some time, even years, before they can switch to another product. So I thought I'd just give that feedback. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Richard. I'm delighted to hear that there are connections that can be useful to take these things forward. And thank you for everything that you're doing to address this at a city level. Anybody else?
Anna?
Debbie?
Everybody must just be mindful that the transversal contract, the RT12 tender for government organizations or government departments and anybody linked to a government department, the RT12 is up for renewal. And so a lot of the banned products and products about to be banned will be removed off the RT12 tender in 2026.
What is the RT12 tender? Is it for pesticides or weed control?
It's for pesticides, so it's everything. So it's veterinary products, it's pesticides, so all the pesticides and veterinary products. So are on the RT12 tender. So that's everything, including plants and everything. So it's all of that stuff. So basically, everything that has been banned already will be removed of the RT12 tender. So basically, brodifacoum will no longer be on the RT12 tender for any government department to procure.
And is that is that national? Is that provincial? Is it local? Does it extend all the way through?
RT12. It's the national tender.
Okay, and how does that relate to what happens in the
municipalities and everybody?
Okay, thank you. Yes, Haley. Thank you, Debbie. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off so abruptly. Haley?
Hi, Anna, and thank you to both you and Debbie for a really insightful and interesting presentation. I'm in Ward 71, and I'm just wondering, we're very near a wetland. There are a vast number of rodents around. I'm curious about a household solution. I don't have the gall to snap a rat's neck up front. I don't mind humane catching them. That's what we have been doing, but the re-releasing is the trouble. Where do you go to release them? That is not, you're just like creating a cycle, recycling the same rats, I imagine, and then they go off and breed, and then, you deal with the bigger problem down the line. So I'm curious as to what perhaps you or Debbie could suggest for households. Well, how do we deal with these things? There are also owls in the area. There's a vast number of bird life, cats, dogs, pets. So what
Haley,
is the
I'd
best
love to
solution?
refer you back to, so Debbie shared some options and I shared, I think, I think until those solutions
Anna?
come out, it's using your moral compass about which of the solutions you go for. There's the one
Anna.
for relocation, there's the electric.
No.
No?
And if they are an invasive species, so if it is the house mouse or the brown rat or anything that is listed under the NEMBA invasive alien species regulations, they have to be exterminated.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you for that.
Thank you, Debbie.
I'm
Wow.
still not going to wring the poor little guy's neck. I mean, I'm talking about the brown. I think it's a brown rat. It looks brown.
Yeah, so Andrea's got her hand up. Which Andrea is it?
It's me,
Oh,
Andrea Ross.
hello,
Sorry,
Andrea.
I didn't put my last name, sorry. And thanks to everyone for the presentations we've had and the discussion, which is very important. So from my perspective and from the research that I've done in the townships, which Elroy referred to, we handed out over 700 high-sprung rat traps. So the rat traps that you can buy in the supermarket, the wooden ones with the brass bars, are not recommended. They will just chew a limb off or run away with it. You can buy either online or we got them at hardware shops. You can get these high-sprung rat traps, and those were the most effective. You need to clean them. We have put instructions in the booklet that I shared earlier. You can also download the booklet on the website. So it's the low toxic or low danger pest control for communities. And we specifically targeted the recipes for people to use in townships because we were trying to encourage the stopping of using the street pesticides. We do have some other control recipes in there for rats, but we went back 6 months later and found that people were still using, 85% of the people we had handed the rat traps out were still using them. Those that weren't using them had actually handed them on to others because they were effective. The thing with rat control is you just have to keep continuing. So you have to wash the rat traps and you have to continue setting them up. I really do. I am in favor of rat traps. I know others aren't, but they are effective. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrea. And just to go back to the conversation that I had with the pest control guy, whose heart was really in the right place, and has so much knowledge and experience. He felt that the electric rat trap, Debbie, that you said is not SPCA approved, he felt that it was the most humane and quickest, avoid secondary poisoning, etc., and that they die quickly. Sorry to be having this discussion so frankly. I haven't come in as an expert. It's such a complicated topic, and it has so many different aspects of it to consider. It's a very different conversation to have from a middle-class home than for the townships. And my invitation currently is, now that I've put out as much information as I could find in a very short amount of time, which is not my, it's not my area of expertise currently, but I'm hoping to start more conversations where more information can be shared. I'm going to suggest that those on the call take the best information that they can according to their moral compass and the magnitude of the problems that they face, and make decisions from there, or continue the conversation in the various groups and suburb chats with other residents. We don't have the ideal world solution right now, and so this topic is going to just be a little bit fraught. Okay, and with that, it is 28 minutes past 5. Everybody stayed on for very, very long. Thank you so much for all of our incredible speakers. It's been such a well-rounded, and I'm not in the light, it's been a well-rounded talk. I've certainly learned so much. I'm so proud of all of the suburbs that are taking action. Nanette's tireless advocacy for ending the blanket spraying. And we are making small victories and big victories as per the turbophos ban and the highly hazardous pesticide phase out. And if we all work together in our areas of influence, we are proving that we can change our local areas, our provinces, and even our countries, and maybe even our regions. So lots of love, everybody. Thank you so much. Send me your, mail me, and I will add you to links, etc. Have a beautiful week.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everybody. We'll get there. Maybe we don't have perfect solutions just yet, but we're getting there bit by bit.